the Opensignal work that you do you notice quite big, just on this US issue, the perception that the US and China is the other one, and this always gets sort of thrown out as a bit of a trope, actually, that Europe's lagging in 5G and it's so much worse in Europe because there's too much competition and we're way behind and we're not going to be able to take advantage of the digital economy, and look at America, isn't it brilliant? But do you see anything in your metrics that kind of back that up, that coverage and quality and these sorts of things are pretty lousy in the UK and other European markets compared with Nebraska?
That's a very specific question.
Yeah. Come on, you think you're so clever. Tell us about Nebraska.
Let me pull out the data. I have to actually double check how it looks like.
Hello and welcome to another Telecoms.com podcast. We're not going to be in the studio again for a little while because Ian and I are going to Copenhagen next week. Well, we're hoping to do one from there, and we might even have our mate Strandy on that one.
Yeah.
But I'm delighted to say we have a special guest this week, Sylvia Keshish. Is that pronounced right?
Yeah, that's perfect.
From Opensignal, formerly Ookla, and before that, GSMA Intelligence.
That is correct.
So basically, you've just been keeping an eye on mobile shit for a very long time.
For a very long time,
Okay.
yes.
Is that what you put on your LinkedIn? I keep an eye on mobile shit.
Well, for a while it was IoT. So for like almost 10 years.
Oh,
yeah,
you
GSMA was
okay.
IoT.
Well, maybe we get onto that. We don't talk about IoT that much.
We haven't done
let's
for
not.
ages.
Let's not. Okay, fair enough. Well, it's sort of a bit out of fashion now, isn't it? It doesn't come up that much.
very
I
much
used to write about it all the time at one stage, and I haven't written an IoT story for.
It's like some other abbreviations like NFV and that sort of thing. They used to be a big deal 5 or 10 years ago.
Virtualization's still there.
Yeah. But we just don't talk about NFV anymore, do we?
They just dropped the NF bit because it didn't go down very well, did it?
But IoT is important. It's one of the 3 bits of the 5G triangle.
Massive IoT, yes.
Yeah.
So massive, there are lots of IoT all over.
There we are. So we might get onto it, whether you like it or not, Sylvia.
Yeah, definitely.
No, actually, it's slightly relevant because I was looking. We had the 5G triangle, which is like more mobile broadband.
Yeah.
EMBB. Critical IoT and then massive IoT.
There we are. And now for 6G we got a hexagon, where they sort of join them all up. In fact, I might get that hexagon up.
What's 7G going to be like then? Pentagon.
The hexagon is 3 of the same things. And
And then they got bits in between
them, which I just think is a bit silly.
Exactly.
Really.
I might. As soon as I've gone on that tangent,
you can have massive IoT and ultra reliable low latency stuff.
As soon as I've gone on that tangent,
why would they have to be mutually exclusive anyway?
They're not, but like we were already talking about 5G advanced, so 5.5G, and there's lots of talks. Even you have like RedCap, like almost there, like in between all of the releases. So that's already important for some of the operators. So yeah. Already getting into it, yes.
Yeah, all right. So look, here's the hexagon. I got it from the ITU's website. Usage scenarios of IMT 2030. So the existing triangle is, as we say, the mobile broadband, the low latency, and the massive IoT. And then linking enhanced mobile broadband and IoT is integrated sensing and communication. Linking IoT and low latency is ubiquitous connectivity. And linking low latency and mobile broadband is AI and communication. They're all a bit fucking vague, aren't they?
Well, the sensing one is the one that I think is a bit different, potentially.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the one that, people apparently at 3GPP...
Mobile networks are going to get more sensitive, Sylvia.
Getting a bit more excited about.
Get in touch with their feelings.
Because it is something that you can describe to a consumer.
Yeah.
You can go into the pub in the future.
That's it.
And when you're sitting down,
and it knows when you're
almost
about to
finish your pint,
and you're in danger of having 10 seconds.
The radio signal will reach into your pint and then trigger a signal for the barman to come over with another one straight away.
I mean the robot barman?
Yeah, I'm not going to be happy till it's like a little drone that whizzes over and just pisses into my pint glass. Then I think we've arrived.
Yeah. But have you ever heard of Neom, the city that was built in Saudi Arabia, when everything's literally talking to each other? And
really?
Yes.
Don't know about that. Do you know about that?
Yes,
I do know about Neom, but it's
have we?
It's been scaled back a lot. The plans. It's not turned out to be what it was cracked up to be, has it? It's much smaller.
That was a promise.
Scale.
That was a vision.
Yeah.
But
It was
I
a vision,
think obviously
not realised.
No, I read a bit about this. They said 70 miles.
Yeah.
Then they were like, okay, no, it's going to be 7 miles. Then the internet backlash.
Then they went 7 metres.
There was so much
miles of what?
It's going to be a
70-mile city.
Oh, I see.
A long line.
70-mile long city, like something out of Blade Runner.
But the backlash was so bad, they're like, okay, you know what? We're actually going to do the 70 miles.
Yeah. it might sound hideous to you, but to your average sort of tech-obsessed Saudi Arabian billionaire, it sounds brilliant.
Google Neom. Yeah.
Neom, yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So I remember talking about this many years ago at one of the events in Asia that I shot, MWC Shanghai, and it was all about to be ready, and then suddenly it became all quiet.
Yeah.
Who's the guy who used to work at Ofcom as CTO, and he was at EE before that? He's been at a few of our events in the past. Mansour. He was involved with Neom, I think, to some extent. He was working, I think, in...
Things that when you look at, how can you even make a building that's this big? How much material... how is that going to work?
And also that was supposed to be built like in the middle of desert.
Yeah.
Just to become a hub for international expansion and so on.
Yeah.
So looking at the website, there's the usual sort of utopian / sort of obscenely opulent stuff that you expect from that part of the world. And then it's got a bit of blurb. It says, located in the temperate northwest of Saudi Arabia. Now, I didn't know there was a temperate part of Saudi Arabia.
Well, it's
so you live
temperate
and
by
learn.
Saudi Arabian standards. I think.
Neom's diverse climate offers both sun-soaked beaches and fucking hot deserts. No. And snow-capped mountains, apparently. It's got snow-capped mountains in Saudi Arabia.
Really?
No one told me that.
Where you go skiing?
Do you know what I mean?
You can go skiing in Iran,
Really?
can't you?
But that's about diversifying away from oil, right? So that innovating,
Right.
using 5G to innovate. And
Yeah,
those
fair enough.
wonderful
Fair
things.
enough. That makes sense. Neom's unique location will provide residents with enhanced livability. That sounds a bit
This is the
dystopian.
sort of place where Matt's going to be heading at weekends, isn't it?
Yeah. Our colleague Matt Poucher, who's moved over to Saudi Arabia.
It's like the movie Elysium, where all the rich people
yeah.
live in there.
Yeah.
This is that, but on Earth, yeah.
While protecting 95% of the surrounding natural landscape. That's a weird data point, isn't it? We only fuck 5%
Have
of it up.
you seen the renders?
Yeah, I've seen a few things. I mean, I don't want to go too far down this rabbit hole, but
The whole outside is going to be mirrors.
Why is it called Magna?
Magna is Neom's luxury coastal destination. That's just what comes up on their homepage.
I think it's the end bit that ends in the ocean.
And then Neom is progressing fast to a new future. Yeah.
But I think that was the promise to do like also autonomous vehicles, pedestrians being all protected,
train.
exactly, train, high-speed train, everything talking to each other, connected,
It looks nice. Are they going to have dancing girls and beer there, do you think?
Don't think so, mate.
Well, exactly then.
I think they're going to spend all the money on this.
I think and getting hold of beer in Saudi Arabia is not a straightforward proposition, is it?
It's not. It's easier than I thought it would be, though. Apparently, I've been told
Okay.
by reliable
By
sources.
people who you're not going to incriminate.
People close to the matter.
All right. Anyway, so yes, there was some unexpected bollocks. What else have we got to talk about? Ian and I, we both went to an event earlier on this week, hosted by Rakuten.
That was unexpected bollocks as well, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, I just didn't get what the point of it was. I mean, it wasn't a bad event. It was at their offices. They got these nice offices right on the bank of the Thames, and they had some good speakers up there. There just didn't seem to be an obvious sort of coherent point to it. It wasn't a Rakuten or Rakuten Symphony. Although maybe they're deserving of sympathy.
They're changing their name to.
Change rebrand to Rakuten Sympathy. We're having a hard time, all right? So there wasn't corporate chest beating for them. And there was just sort of general, 5G. It's a bit fucking tricky, isn't it? That was about all I...
Yeah, it was a little bit incoherent in a way. But it was nice. I mean, my main takeaway was got to see some people I hadn't seen for a little while.
Yep.
And there was quite a lot of interesting people there on the analyst side.
Yep.
You were there.
Which is surprising in and of itself.
We had a beer afterwards.
We had beer after, yeah. And we concluded that the attempt by Brewdog to take on Neck Oil, Beavertown Neck Oil, is shit. What's it called?
I can't remember.
Wingman, yeah.
I disagree.
You like Wingman?
Here we are.
It's watery. It's pissy.
Oh, maybe it was the pint one, but the can, I can give you two cans. I'll challenge you to find the difference.
Between Neck Oil and Wingman?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, this is very noticeably different.
Oh, maybe that's the pub thing, yeah.
But
Well, I don't know. They managed not to fuck up Neck Oil in the pub.
do we have a Neck Oil?
I've
Hazy
had
J?
bad Neck Oil pints before.
No, we had a Hazy Jane after that, and we were like, oh, that's better.
Yeah.
Because that was full of flavour. We were getting worried. For a
It was
second.
very watery, Pierre.
I have nothing to add to this conversation.
No.
I'll bring women next time.
Sylvia, you haven't opened your G&T yet.
Oh, shit. Sorry. Apologies.
So you've got... Sylvia's got... she's obviously not a big beer drinker, I'm guessing. But you've got a Bombay Sapphire...
The finest
Pre-made
that
G&T.
W.H. Smith at
Really,
Blackfriars
you
Freight
need
Station
some
could
ice, don't you, in a
produce.
glass?
I think it'll be alright.
Can't we spare
Yeah.
some ice in a glass?
Lady like
That's all right.
drinking.
Just
Cheers.
knock it back before it gets
All
warm. Cheers.
And then you get all the deep insights from me.
Yeah, well,
Truth.
that's the plan. In a couple of hours,
Yes.
in a couple of hours, you'll be slagging off past employers.
Wow. Which one?
Well, if you're ready to start now, that's fine. You go ahead. No, I'm joking. What was I going to say? Yeah, that's about 6.5%. That one.
Yes.
The Gordon's one's about 5%, and I'm like, who mixes a 5% alcohol G&T? And then there's one you can get. I think it's Tanqueray or something that's closer to 8%. That's a bit more like it.
What if you, Jack, pour that in a glass and then add some more gin?
Stick some more gin in, I would. I mean, if you make a G&T, you're looking at.
Oh, you said half and half, no?
Well, we had this chat before. Somewhere between half and half and
Third.
a quarter, 3/4.
I think it's supposed to be a third gin.
If you make a G&T at home,
2 parts
Sylvia.
tonic
So
to
I
1
do-
part gin.
One of the little cans of tonic and then measure of gin.
All right.
Uh,
Oh,
mean,
you do the gin after, do you?
Do you put the
actually,
gin on
no,
top
the
of
other
the
way.
tonic?
Yeah.
No,
So-
first gin, then tonic.
So when you picture it in a glass, how far up the glass do you think the
So
gin
probably
goes?
if you think about this, probably will be up to here.
So you're doing about a quarter, let's
yes,
say.
yes.
So
At the
yours-
beginning of the night.
So yours is about
obviously.
10%.
Yes.
Some of us, more ambitious drinkers, maybe
It doesn't
get
surprise
up
me
to
that you
about
want
half and half.
I think I always thought it was supposed to be 1 part gin to 2 parts tonic.
When you have them in Spain, they're normally about half and half.
Oh, Spain is different matter. Spain is another level of
But
gin and
you get a
tonic,
cognac
yes.
They go
in
for it, don't they?
Spain, and they just sort of glug it out, and there's none
Yeah,
of this,
free pour. Well, that's in Spain. They
Yeah.
free pour as well.
They free pour. There's none of this pathetic measuring it, so it's like
Yeah, in a little
Yes.
cylinder or a
tiny
little
millimetre
optic.
up the side of the glass.
Yeah, those things make me tense.
The good old days at
Yeah.
MWC in the evening.
Yeah,
drinking,
yeah.
Sipping gin and tonic.
Well, we still haven't learned to grow up yet. In fact, last time I met Sylvia face to face, we were sat next to each other at the Telecoms, the Glotel Awards.
Glotto.
And I seem to remember vaguely saying that we were hoping that we'd bump into each other in World Congress, but we didn't. So there we
No,
go.
I was on gardening leave, so
Oh,
I was in
right,
between
yeah.
jobs.
Yeah,
And,
so that was when you're moving between Ookla
Yes.
and Opensignal. So do you think you're gonna be there next year?
hoping so. Yes.
Okay, well, it's a date then, isn't it?
Yes. Wednesday it is. That's
yeah,
what I
yeah,
remember.
Wednesday. Well,
Yes,
we've got to sort
Wednesday.
that out. It was a bit of a shit show Wednesday last year. So we got to get in there. And you brought some beer. Actually, we got to give a shout out to your other half, Matt, is it?
Yes.
Matt recommended a bunch of beers from Marlow that we may
Marlow
well have a
Brewery.
go at.
That's
Marlow
where he's
Brewery.
from. So yeah.
Yeah.
Shout out to Rebellion Brewery.
Oh, I know them. My
You know
parents
them?
aren't that far from Marlow.
Oh really?
Give a couple of little
Tring
shout
sort of
out.
area.
So we've
Amersham,
got
and,
Rebellion Lager and Rebellion 24 Carat, which is some kind of golden ale.
I'll have one of those now.
Do you want me to make it a bit colder, or are you happy to have it sort of tepid?
No, I'll have it colder if it's not
Yeah,
cold.
well then don't have one right now. Talk for a sec while I sort out the ice bucket.
Okay. What am I talking about?
Why don't you actually? No, I'll queue it up and I'll let Sylvia talk. She's much more interesting than you.
Good.
So yeah, I think we finished talking bollocks, but some of that stuff we might come back to that Rakuten thing because it might be relevant to your day job. But why don't you just start by introducing yourself a bit more, because I'm sure I didn't do a particularly good job, and also Opensignal and what it does.
Sure. Yeah, Sylvia Kashish, the senior director at Opensignal, joined a couple of months ago in March this year. I was at Ookla before, GSM Intelligence, looking at IT and enterprise. And then before that, actually, not far from here, just across the road, started at Pyramid Research. That was boutique TMT house, and yeah, telco analyst through and through for quite a while. I'll not say how many years, because I would.
Pyramid, yeah.
Yes, exactly. That's when I got to meet light reading, heavy reading, and so on. So I've been there for a while, and now so Opensignal very much tests and measuring company, trying to understand the state of mobile networks.
Yep.
So just providing insights to operators, to regulators, international bodies in terms of how the networks are performing. And the way we measure it, I'll give you a little bit of a background, is kind of,
Sorry, Pierre's
Sorry.
moving me around.
You're
Oh, I have to
sliding.
move. Okay, cool.
Your mic stands are clashing.
Oh dear.
No, it's all right. You're good.
Okay, that's
Carry
fine.
on.
Measure the same way you would experience you experience your mobile or fixed network. So we measure via SDK, embedded in apps, and we look at different things like speed.
So
and
is
so
it
on.
just Ookla? People might have heard that because of the speed test app.
Yes.
Is that where Ookla gets a lot of its data from?
Yes.
From people who
So
use speed
yes.
data. And
So-
is it the same with Opensignal, or you got
No,
different?
it's different
Okay.
approach. So it's passive data using SDK that's
Okay.
embedded in
So it's,
partner
so
apps.
it's stuff no one knows about. It's just happening behind the scenes.
It's happening.
So
behind the
so
scenes.
so there's apps that are native on your phone that are doing it.
Yes.
It's kind of how it's working.
Yes.
But do you have to sign up to anything, or does GDPR affect it at all, or is it?
I wouldn't
Presumably anonymised.
be the best
It's
person to
anonymised
talk about
data, I
this, but
guess.
yeah, there's privacy. We're following all the GDPR
Right.
compliant
And it will
policies
be
and so on.
ordinary apps that you're getting as
Yes,
soon as
the
you get
ordinary-
the smartphone out of the box. It's sort of there in the background.
There's
running.
lots of partners in there, and so we
Right.
kind of we also have a partner program with the app providers when we actually provide them with insights in terms of how users are using the apps and so on. And we actually found what's quite interesting is bad network experience means that people will churn away from your apps. So mobile network experience not only affects you, operators, you
The
also
app providers.
yes.
Okay.
So
Because a lot of
that's-
end users don't know what to blame it on, do they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
they don't
exactly.
get it. They don't even know
Yes.
what a network is. A lot of them, they just think it's the phones and
Yes.
apps. So
the phone is not working, and why is it not working? So back to that actually was quite interesting. And recently, I think the city of Virgin Mobile Media came out saying, "Let's move away from how does she call them?"
Yeah, you sent me it earlier.
Yes, let's move away. We're just talking about speed.
So she's called Jeannie York, and she said, leaving the vanity metrics
vanity
behind
metrics.
right.
and
Yes.
focusing on what matters.
What does she mean by
customer
vanity
experience.
metrics?
So the top level metrics like download speed,
The
upload
highest
and so
ones that
on,
you can
the
get.
the highest that you can get. Like, does it really matter that you get 1 gigabit if your network
Right.
is not reliable? So that's kind of what we also take into the market, just trying to educate on consistent quality. And I can talk about how we measure consistent quality, but quality, reliability. So whether or not the network is reliable, whether or not you can do day-to-day tasks, and whether you can use your applications on the mobile network when you need it, because that's like from the end user point of view, you don't really care whether you get hundreds of megabits per second download or upload. You might care more about, but if you cannot access your network, that's what you really care about. And that's, if you have a bad experience, that's when you're going to churn. So that's what Opensignal is doing. What we're trying to do is we're trying to package those insights and help operators to understand when they have black white spots, when they have areas. We look at the impact that AT&T outage has in the US on the performance as well. So
Right.
again, if you have lots of outages on your network, that's going to affect your reliability score. And not surprisingly, countries like Denmark at the very top. So Denmark is at the top in terms of reliable mobile networks. It won't surprise you, maybe not the fastest network, but the most reliable network. So kind of like, let's just move away from talking about speed.
So,
move.
so it's quite different from Ookla in the sense that they would sort of come out with stats to do with you can download this, whereas you're more sort of going, this is what, this shows how many customers are satisfied with the
Yes,
service.
quality of
that sort thing.
experience. So we're talking quality of experience, not only quality of service, so kind of download, upload, but quality of experience. How good your experience is on the network when you play games, when you watch video, and so on. So that's the main focus, just thinking about, how do you consume the networks?
Right.
So that is an interesting thing, because it sort of slightly overlaps with some of the stuff that came up at this Rakuten event, where, like I said at the start, it wasn't the most focused in terms of the subject matter and the topics, but trying to distill it in my mind, I don't know if it's the same for people on the analyst side, but journalists, part of our reflexive instinct is to try and picture something and then distill it down into about a few hundred words, because that's our day job, isn't it? And a big thing I took from it was just everyone going, shit, it's really hard to get a hang of this 5G thing, like the monetization, the innovation, the and a sort of acknowledgement that the industry's in a bit of a tight spot at the moment in terms of revenue growth, because it's really hard to grow subscribers because most developed markets are saturated in terms of.
Yes.
So then a lot of it, and this probably plays squarely into your day job, a lot of it is about churn. And a lot of ways. So there was talk about efficiency. One guy kept going on about cost per bit, didn't he? And you and I thought,
Baxter.
yeah, he was like former COO of 3. Is that
Well, he
guy?
was former COO and CTO of 3.
Oh,
And
okay.
before that, he worked for Orange in a fairly senior technical
Right,
role
so
as well.
he's got proper credentials.
Yeah.
But yeah, he was talking about that. And the interesting thing, sorry, just carry on this little tangent. The interesting thing that came from that, and I think it came
Tangents
up
are
when
what we specialise in.
we do.
Yeah, I know.
One thing that came up for that is this cost per bit metric and lowering that applies if the operator business model is a bit like a utility. where they're just there to provide the basic service in the most efficient way possible, and they eke out little bits of margin from just slightly lowering the cost per bit, i.e. slightly lowering OPEX, I guess. Whereas you could go in another direction and go, fuck it, I'm not so worried about cost per bit because I'm going to try and innovate and come up with new digital products or new ways of increasing ARPU or whatever.
But they've all gone in the cost per bit direction.
Yeah.
Actually, they haven't, because I sort of agree with Dean to a certain extent that the cost per bit's a bit of a meaningless metric.
So
but
Dean Bubley was there and he pushed back on that one.
Well, I think that in a sense he's not pushing back on the idea that operators are looking at efficiency and trying to run like low cost, super efficient networks. It's just this cost per bit metric itself doesn't really tell you very much, because I mean, he came over to me after he's made the point, if you've got a network, City Fiber's just built a network and they don't have very many subscribers on it at the moment, the cost per bit's really high. But as soon as you get a load of subscribers on it, the cost per bit's really low. But your actual build-out costs are done. It's not really, a lot of that's fixed flat costs. It's not like every gigabyte of usage necessitates extra spending by the telco. It goes up in layers, more or less, really. You build one of these high-capacity networks, and there's going to come a point in the future when you might need to upgrade the active electronics at either end of it. But it's not like the gigabytes rises sort of in lockstep with costs or anything like that. So there's not a correlation. So I think that's kind of what Dean was getting at to some extent. This cost per bit's a bit of a meaningless metric these days, I think.
But when you think about the cost building out and cost of building out, once you're done with the build out, as you said, there's not that much incremental that you have to do, and you have the network in place. So right now there's lots of spend on improving the infrastructure. There's copper switch off happening in Norway, and Spain is going the same way. So kind of legacy networks are going away, which makes sense. And I think what is Orange, they already finished the rollout, and that's that you can definitely see in the results that they see more profitability because of that.
Yeah, I think that's, totally. So a lot of the operators now are talking about like lower capital intensity over the next few years because they've done their fibre build out, which is one of the big costs, like digging up the streets and everything. But we've been talking about this all the time on the pod over the last few weeks. The kind of 5G has really slowed down because it's not completely built out, but they're not seeing what you were just saying. They're not seeing a kind of new monetizable services from it, and therefore they don't really have any incentive to do it. And if traffic's growth slowing down, which a lot of the analysts are now saying it is, then you've got less kind of pressure on you to.
So another person who we don't often see, but has been on the pod loads of times, one of our most frequent guests over the years is William Webb.
Yeah.
And he's one on the last pod he introduced it, although he'd first come up with this in about
Professor
2016.
William Webb.
Professor William Webb, no less. He came up with this thing. So, I don't know, Sylvia, from your point of view, how much you sort of pay attention to things like sort of quarterlies from people like Ericsson and Nokia, but Ericsson especially, okay. So you're probably familiar with the fact that for ages, Ericsson had been saying, okay, no one's spending any money right now, but they've got to sooner or later because of the way in which network traffic's going up. Yeah. But William's point, and he actually called this ages ago, is that it's likely to follow an S curve, and it has been in the exponential phase of that S curve. Let's say 5 years ago. But he reckons it's already levelling right off, and so.
Well, it's not just him now saying it. The data's there. It's there. It's historic data that shows it's.
And he's just feeling vindicated because he called it ages ago.
So he's mapped his original S curve onto what's going on. The data you can get from people like Barclays and Analysis Mason does it. And
is that something you guys do? Do you keep an eye on like overall data traffic volume and that sort of thing?
Not as much. I think we can see the traffic, but one interesting thing we're about to publish is looking at what happened in India, because India October 2022, the 5G C-band license finally has been awarded, and we've seen an uptake very, very fast. So I think the initial speed is around 200, 300 megabits per second. And just recently we look at what's going on at the network level, and the speeds are going down, whilst at the same time the traffic is massively increasing.
Yeah.
So I think when I was looking at data for the trial, which is the regulator in there, I think they said 0.01% in Q1 last year of all traffic. Mobile traffic was 5G, and I think by Q4 was 13-14%.
Yeah.
And because of that, the speeds decreasing,
That's
because
a
you
good
think
point.
about congestion and so on. And And again, in India, which is really interesting, they had to build out the backbone very much because obviously, if you don't have a good backbone, if you don't have fiber,
it's all a lot newer since Geo came along.
I mean, William has said that there are variations in markets. Quite
I was
going to
say,
and I would have thought a market like India would be an exception.
It's
to that
mobile.
rule because it's heavily mobile, so there's not Wi-Fi back.
Exactly,
and it's a younger and it's a less mature market.
It's just done 5G, so there are obviously going to be exceptions. But
in the developed like Western Europe and North America, I'm sure he's spot on.
I mean, his rationale is really interesting because I got a sort of sneak preview of this book that is coming out soon that he sent me. This is one of the good things about the Rakuten event was I got chatting with William and I said,
"You start doing a book a year right now."
Book coming out, and
he's like Barbara Cartland.
And so he sent me
Agatha
some
Christie.
and his rationale for, because I think the thing has always been that we're going to get new services and things just keep going up and up and up, and I remember you go back to the 20 years when the first generation of fixed line broadband stuff was being rolled out, kind of ADSL copper based, and I was actually at the time there were a lot of people sort of going around going, we don't need fiber because it's going to slow down at some point and we can support everything that we need, and it kind of has carried on going up with the launch of new services. But William's rationale is really interesting. He's basically saying there's only so much you can consume, and there's only one service you actually need to be interested in, which if you're talking about smartphones specifically, this is, and 5G, which is video, high definition video on your smartphone, is like it's like if you're thinking about the usage of your smartphone is like sitting down for a meal. That's the most calorific meal you can possibly have.
Yeah.
And there's nothing that's going to go beyond that.
That's your supersized McDonald's meal.
Exactly. So
bucket of KFC.
So what he's done is he's looked at that and he's gone, if you assume really high levels of video usage on smartphones in a few years' time, then it can't go up beyond that. There's only so much a person can eat, basically. Kind of rationale.
There isn't another level of data consumption.
And then I got into this conversation with him about, well, what about other services that we can't envisage? But there's nothing really that you can.
VR, AR, isn't it?
So VR, AR is a total wonky one because VR won't happen on mobile. Clearly.
No.
Did you see the recent advert? I think that was Metaswitch when it was helping somebody build something from IKEA. I was like, who is going to buy a headset just to help you buy?
Totally, and you won't use it on a mobile network.
No,
now you might maybe in somewhere like India if there's not a fixed line option, but you wouldn't, for safety reasons. You're not going to be using VR out and about. And AR actually is quite low levels of traffic compared to video. Things like Pokemon Go. And the other one's AI. This is a thing everybody's talking about. What impact's AI going to have on networks? And
well, we're going to more on that later because we're going to talk about the Apple thing.
It's not just William, but actually Dean and various other people are very sort of downbeat about why AI would put. And actually, CTOs that I've talked to don't really see that having a big impact on access network. But we can talk about that.
Yeah,
later.
I'll put a pin in it just because you wrote a good analysis on it and I wrote about it.
Did
Apple. Yeah, you wrote that blog.
Oh yeah. Sorry.
I mean, it wasn't that good.
No, someone said that I was a bit of a wanker for writing it on
LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Did they? Oh, well, we should get into that.
Normally I really like your analysis, Ian, but
this
on this
time
one, you're way off.
Drop the ball.
But sorry, let me add something. Like when you think about video and live video and using headsets, if your latency is not great, you're going to get a headache, right? So it's very basic premise of you
or throw up. Or
exactly. So we have to be very real about the use cases and whether they make sense.
They've always
or
felt
not.
like a bit of a reach, a bit of a Hail Mary. It's like we've set up this whole generation, this fifth generation of mobiles, all based on an order of magnitude more network usage than previously. But where are these? You hate to use words like killer app and that sort of thing. But where are these use cases that justify that speculation? Because they're still not really there.
I actually have a point about that. I was on a Fierce Wireless webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I said, "Well, we're still waiting for 5G killer app. We're discussing 5G Advanced and 6G." And then somebody in the chat has said, "Why do we need to have a killer app?" I'm like, well, how else are you going to monetize the network?
What's the point of it?
What's the point of rolling out 5G just for the sake of it?
Yeah.
And kind of goes back to 2 points. So one point is we have this cyclical 10-year cycle of upgrading networks and so on. And now most of operators are saying we don't want to do it. We don't have the money.
Exactly.
5G, if we don't see a killer use case, so 5G is going to kill us. It's going to make us bankrupt. And that goes to another point. Like there's lots of discussion about M&As across Europe, and you probably heard Vodafone talking at times about return of capital invested. How Europe versus US, like how unfair it is, and what have you. 3 large players, national players in the US. ARPU much higher. Europe, very, very different picture. So that's number one. You need to be able to monetize the networks. Number two, US is a very different story. So recently, sorry, tell me when you want to.
No, not at all. Go for it, man.
We have recently.
I'm not just going to go, yeah, right, that's enough.
5G fixed wireless access in the US. And that's the monetization killer app in the US, fixed wireless access. So both T-Mobile and Verizon did very well on that. And actually, because we have very deep insights into the US, we could see that it's not a rural proposition. So it's very competitive with cable. And quite a lot of net adds in the US were actually going to fixed wireless access just because it is cheaper. And it appeals more to younger audiences, those that don't necessarily want to have the triple play, quadruple play, all you can eat bundles. They just want to have a connection and be able to take it away with you wherever you go. Yeah. Right. And also what we've seen based
so the FWA is sort of being positioned as a portable thing.
Yeah.
Right, you just take the
self-installed.
Free has marketed it that way in the UK.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Because
self-installed.
Their target market was actually itinerant people like students who might be moving homes a lot, or 50-year-olds who haven't bought their own home. Who might be able to take the equipment with them and sort of stick it on a windowsill, and or maybe even.
I wouldn't bother taking any broadband equipment you had at your old place with you because it's obviously shit.
You take your broadband equipment, you put it next to you on the park bench, and then you.
You're working remotely.
Your fixed wireless access signal to your laptop, and you
connected.
But that's a different approach.
Exactly.
Like in certain countries, let's say Norway and the Nordics, they want to be able to go and install it for you. And I think Imogen, oh goodness, one of the Irish companies, fixed wireless access companies, said, no, you cannot do it because you bleed out a lot of spectrum and it's not properly set up and what have you, so you cannot have self-install. So there's a lot of discussions whether or not self-install or non-self-installed. Obviously, when you send somebody to install it, costs more money. So again, you don't necessarily see it. But back to the point about the fixed wireless access.
Which I know you, this is quite a good professional segue of you. I've noticed that Opensignal, I'm looking at your website, you got a report recently, written by a bloke who sounds like he's got a Polish surname as well.
Yes, Robert Wyrzykowski.
Right, I'm pleased you pronounced that.
Yes, I can pronounce that.
Far too many consonants going on.
Only employ Polish people.
Yeah,
well, actually, to be fair, half of our analyst team is Eastern European. No.
Right. So yeah, Robert Wyrzykowski.
Wyrzykowski.
Oh, that's close enough.
That's not bad because it's just like a string of consonants, isn't it?
It is.
Polish.
Yes.
It's cheating at Scrabble.
What have they got?
Polish is cheating at Scrabble.
Yeah, so Robert wrote this really, really good report, and we're actually going to do a webinar at the end of the month, I think 27th, on that, just explaining what happened in the US, whether or not operators elsewhere can replicate this. It's quite a success story. And what we also looked at, back to my point, is that the networks, the operators' networks didn't necessarily suffer. So they managed to deal with the congestion that fixed wireless access brings into the network. So kind of look at the time of day, how it performs.
Which is interesting. It's a bit counterintuitive because broadband is typically unmetered. And then you've got loads of people streaming Netflix and all that sort of thing. So you'd think the hit on the network from fixed wireless access would be a hell of a lot greater than the equivalent mobile subscriber. Is that not the case?
It's kind of like for like, at least in the US. But what we've seen in Saudi is Zain rolled out fixed wireless access to become the challenger. And you can really see that fixed wireless access put quite a bit of strain on the network. So they're now investing a lot of money into it. And it's just fascinating looking at it from the perspective, different approaches and what have you. Yes, so fixed wireless access is something that we're looking at because we get lots of questions from our clients. They want to understand, what's going on, how the performance looks like. So we looked at recently, that's another Eastern European surname for you, Andrei Popov. He wrote...
not Polish, though.
Not Polish, no.
That's at least two vowels in.
That's Bulgarian.
I'm not interested.
No. So he looked at fixed wireless access in Italy. So again, looking from the perspective, it is not as fast as fiber, but the consistent quality, so how good the network is not far off from fiber. So this is really fascinating. It's really good results.
Which isn't what you'd expect.
No, not at all.
A big drop off.
Exactly.
It feels like halfway between that and satellite if you live on Scottish Island or something.
Three was thinking it could do a really good job with it, and nobody seems to ask them about their FWA business these days, which suggests that maybe it isn't doing that great. But they were like making a big deal about the fact they had so much spectrum that therefore they could support fairly high.
They do.
Yeah, they've got tons of midband, haven't they?
Well, and they'll have even more if this merger goes through.
Wow,
obviously.
that's interesting. There was somebody posted on Telecoms.com that 10 operators complained against the merger of Vodafone.
Well,
and
Andrew
Three.
just wrote today. They got maybe that's what you saw. Our lead story today is headline: BT slams Vodafone 3 merger during CMA investigation. CMA's published all its feedback it's got from the market, and BT is one of the people moaning, but quite a few other people did. And I think one of the BT moans was about spectrum.
Well, but again, I'm not gonna have a policy opinion on that, but typically
You're not going to pick a team.
No, I'm not going to pick a team. But typically, you have to divest spectrum when the M&A goes ahead and so on.
It's how much. I suppose it's how much they're prepared to give away.
Well, here's what Andrew wrote. It's one paragraph. He goes, BT said the merger will create a combined entity with a, quote, dominant 61% share of UK mobile network capacity, resulting in a capacity asymmetry.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I mean, Ofcom came out with its own numbers about what the spectrum share would be. And it is obviously very heavily skewed in favour of Vodafone and Three, but that's their kind of rationale for doing it.
But a lot of it's mid-band, isn't it?
Yeah, it's mid-band, but it's kind of their rationale for doing it is to have a lot of spectrum.
Three has 140 megahertz of C-band. They have a lot of C-band. Three has. I don't think Vodafone has as much. I think have 90. Sorry, this is really boring.
But
we wrote...
This is Telecoms.
This is Telecoms. But we wrote a piece again about how potential combined network, like if you put one network on top of the other, how the coverage will look like. And from that point of view, there will be increase in coverage and accessibility. So,
I mean, I guess even if they all had a quarter each and you bring two of them together, they've got 50% and the other two have got 25% each. So, the BT numbers are probably accurate, but the problem is if they start saying you need to give up a huge amount of it, then they undermine the rationale for the deal. So it's like for the other problems they've got, the other problems as I understand it that BT has, which they might not have put in that paper because I haven't seen it, are site numbers and the network sharing.
Because
the network sharing is a massive problem. That
the network sharing is really hard to resolve. I don't know how you get out. I don't know how you deal with that one. But the site numbers, I'm less. I mean, if they put the 3 sites next to Vodafone sites, they've got something like 36,000. They want to go down to what, 24 or something, 25, which is still quite a bit more than the other two have, which I think is sort of 19-ish. But
I think normally when you've got these kind of submissions from people like BT to the CMA, which is our Competition Markets Authority here, I think most of the time they're not necessarily trying to block it. They are trying to lobby such that
there's a reason for them to want it to happen. They just don't want their rival being in a super duper position.
So what they want, what they want is the resulting thing to be as least of a threat as possible to them, and also if they can get hold of some spectrum on the cheap, then so much the better.
So that happens again in Spain, right? With the MásMóvil.
It did, but they brought another player into the market, I think, in Spain. So it's still a 4-player market.
Yeah, but then there was spectrum being divested, and I had to kind of.
It was, but if they do that here, that completely undermines the rationale for the deal, because their whole case for it, their main case for it has been that it shouldn't be a 4-player market; it should be a 3-player market. So if the Ofcom's remedy is to take that spectrum away and give it to a new entrant like Iliad,
create another free mobile thing.
You would think that Three and Vodafone, if they're being sensible, would turn it down, but maybe they could be persuaded not to. But the trouble then is you can end up in the same situation in a few years' time with one or two players not making its return on investment.
What we actually did, that was before my time on Opensignal, so my colleagues did quite a bit of analysis looking at the impact that M&As have on spectrum and user experience. And they pretty much say if you merge two entities, even though they have to divest spectrum, the end user experience improves. I mean, that's kind of no brainer in there. But
do you in your the Opensignal work that you do you notice quite big just on this US issue, the perception that the US and China is the other one and this always gets sort of thrown out as a bit of a trope, actually, that Europe's lagging in 5G and it's so much worse in Europe because there's too much competition and we're way behind and we're not going to be able to take advantage of the digital economy, and look at America, isn't it brilliant? But do you see anything in your metrics that kind of back that up, that coverage and quality and these sorts of things are pretty lousy in the UK and other European markets compared with Nebraska?
That's a very specific question.
Come on. Come on, you think you're so clever. Tell us about Nebraska.
Let me pull out the data. I have to actually double check how it looks like. But when you think about it, so again, depending what you measure. So I think UK is not doing brilliantly well when it comes to that kind of quality and reliability. Just
Really?
Yeah, being UK. I'll have to
Compared
double check
to
this.
what equivalent mature markets?
Compared even to Europe.
Yes, I will have to double check. I don't want to say something that's not accurate. Obviously, I will be
Getting the shit.
penalised. Yeah, definitely.
So just do what I always do, even though I've been doing this for 10 years, just put the caveat, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just say that.
Yeah, but you're allowed to say
But
that.
you've
You're
probably got a bit
journalist.
more of a professional reputation to protect than I do.
Like, yeah, I can probably look it up into one of the reports. But when you think about it, like it's a very different dynamic in the US, right? You have large players, and when you look at fixed broadband, even you have kind of some players that overplay and they compete for the same clients. But the size of the US justifies investment, right?
Yeah.
Across Europe, we have such so many players and very little that they can play for, right? So again, talking about market saturation, there's really interesting dynamics. Like in Europe, we had MVNOs for ages.
Yeah.
US is a bit of a new thing. So you
Now
have...
T-Mobile's just bought the biggest one, hasn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that the Ryan Reynolds one?
No,
Mint, is it?
it's US Cellular, is it?
Oh, okay.
But yeah, they bought the Ryan Reynolds one as well.
I mean, one thing I'm
They'll
always
be buying
interested
Wrexham next.
in is these coverage stats that come out to do with 5G. And I think Howard Watson was on LinkedIn recently saying we've just gone past 75% 5G coverage. But to me...
Population.
Yeah, population coverage. But I just, these stats are becoming increasingly meaningless, I think, because you can walk around and have one bar on your phone and you're not able to actually use a 5G service, or you go into a pub opposite EE's offices, and as we all did after a press conference once, and nobody could get a mobile signal. The indoor coverage is really poor in the UK. It's much worse, actually, I've noticed, than when I'm in other parts of Europe. It seems to be quite bad. And I'm just wondering if these coverage stats, and I don't know if Opensignal does stuff like this, because it sounds like you're looking at things though from a customer experience perspective, which sounds like it would factor that in. Yeah. Yes.
So 5G availability that was done the data is for the end of last year. So Bulgaria was number one. So 5G availability is proportion of time our 5G enabled users had an active 5G connection.
Right.
So Bulgaria was number one. How many? Oh goodness, I'll have to actually think very quickly. So Bulgaria, Finland, France, Croatia, Italy, Greece, Spain, Denmark, Czech Republic, or Czechia, Poland, Austria, Switzerland, Norway, Netherlands, Hungary, Slovakia, Germany, Ireland, Latvia, Slovenia, Portugal, UK.
Damn,
that's pretty bad.
UK 8.4%. Compared to compared to Bulgaria, 20.
What's that
so
metric?
5G availability, so percentage of time that actually the 5G enabled users. So if you have 5G enabled, have active 5G connection.
Have you sent this to Howard Watson?
Okay. So this is.
Are you listening, Howard?
You told me not to slag. Well, you asked me about my, previous company. So.
I know. I actively encourage you slagging. I just figured you wouldn't want to.
That's pretty bad.
But to be fair, Root Metrics has been giving EE award for the best network for
forever.
Yeah. So I'm an EE customer.
Yeah.
Like I have to admit, I'm an EE customer. So after we gave the award, I said. It's all great, and I'm a very loyal customer, but I have literally zero 5G coverage where I live.
Right.
Zero.
And where do you live?
Beckenham.
Right, Kent.
Almost Kent. It depends. During pandemic, that was a bit like
very far southeast London.
Very far. Yes, very far southeast London.
It's like Wandsworth being Surrey.
Right.
Wow. So I was there. Whoever would listen to me there, I said, I have no coverage. Can we look into it? And I was then obviously took advantage of the fact that very senior engineers were there. I sent them screenshots saying I get 2 megabits per second download speed and 0.5 upload.
Right.
Around my house. Not even inside the house because I'm on Wi-Fi. So actually somebody, fair to EE, they actually sent somebody just because I could slag them off publicly.
Yeah.
That the way that I do it now, obviously.
No, we don't get enough bribes considering how influential we are.
Do you think that EE is those stats that come out from Root Metrics are basically making it out to be better than it is?
Well, no, it's because it's different. It's drive testing, right? So you're driving. So it's drive testing using Android.
What is drive? Sorry, drive testing is.
So you're driving certain routes with a certain handset that measures certain things.
Right. And it's percentage of time that you.
Exactly, you
Connected
connected,
on that route.
or the way the experience is, and so on. Sorry, this is probably going to learn a lot about
This is what Rootmetrics does. They
crowdsourced
basically
data.
stick someone
Yes,
in a van with his
in the car. Yes,
and get him to
yeah.
watch Netflix while he's driving around.
Yes, exactly, doing certain measures. So back to my experience
You said
with
it's
EE.
crowdsourced data, so
Yes.
there's got lots of people. They haven't just got one bloke. That's all he does.
Yeah.
Is drive up and down the road trying to watch.
Doing that.
comedy
There are a few
on
of
his
them
phone.
driving.
There are some
A few-
specialists.
There are specialists. That,
Okay.
so back to my point about EE. So they sent somebody and they said, well, actually, just so you know, you're within a coverage of a base station that's quite far from me. And this base station, particular base station that serves you, has 20 megahertz of 1800 megahertz spectrum,
Right.
which is just literally cannot do anything with it. And there is, they
Is
cannot
that,
do,
is that not useful?
that's not useful at all. So I
Not
get the
for 5G.
signal, not for 5G.
Not for 5G.
Not at all.
You want 3.5 gigahertz.
So it's all right for
Yeah.
it's all right for a bit of coverage, but yeah, okay, fair enough.
So you see, like that's it's quite fascinating. So when you think about 5G on your phone, you might see the 5G sign
Yeah,
and the dots.
but that can mean
like
lots of
one,
things.
two. That means that somewhere in the vicinity there might be 5G base station that you can see it far,
It's
far
like what
away.
T-Mobile US did. They
Yes,
suddenly
yeah.
had awesome 5G coverage. It's because they use this 600, this tiny
The
little
low
slivers
band,
of 600
yes,
low
the
band.
low band that gives
And so
you
they had the coverage, but no bandwidth.
bandwidth, but a lot of
Fuck all,
coverage.
what's he saying?
Sorry, yes,
You're warming to the theme of the pod.
well,
I mean, that's.
yeah.
I didn't realise it was as bad as that. That ranking that you
Yeah.
just read out. I didn't realise. I mean, that's dynamite.
So
I think,
5G
if you
download
said-
speed UK is
That's the
at
sort of
very
thing
bottom.
politicians would be grabbing hold of at the moment and going, if we get into power
Yeah.
on July
What
the
you gonna
4th.
do
So
at this
Denmark
Starmer?
as the top. Denmark was at the top with 300 megabits per second download speed, and UK had, for comparison, 118.
Right.
That's just download speed. Just
So,
looking at download speed.
Do you think it's just to do with underinvestment in those critical spectrum bands and they've used lower
But they have
bands? And
spectrum. They have
they
spectrum.
do
I
have
think
it, but have they actually built it out? Because
Well, some of it is like, and not going to go into politics. Like, you know, EE had to pretty much rip out all the network and
Oh, you're
the
talking about
Huawei network.
Huawei
Yeah,
network, and then
yeah.
that actually, you know, delayed some of it. And they're still using the dynamic spectrum.
Whereas the
frames
Germans
for
haven't
one.
done that. They still love a bit of Huawei over there.
Well, a lot of networks that go to Europe, they do have Huawei NZT, like on the sly, right?
Yeah.
Like just
Well, I think in Germany it's not really on the sly. It's just like
No,
we're
it's pretty
using it.
overt at DT.
No,
Yeah.
but so UK is not doing brilliantly well, which is a bit of a shame. But then on the other side, when you think about broadband, we're doing slightly
Yeah,
better.
we're pretty good on fibre,
Yeah.
aren't we?
Fiber
Or at least
getting
we've
there,
been- we've been-
yes.
We've been
So
developing rapidly anyway.
the FTTH forum, they said UK is improving, and again, you know, Virgin Media, they're planning to do a netco as well. So
Yeah.
we again wrote an article about this, like looking at how good the experience is of consumers that have Virgin Media and have a better experience than Operate at the moment. So that's
So the headline for me is this 75% coverage figure that Howard Watson's come out with. You would
It's
say
coverage.
it's shit coverage. It's 75%, but it's shit 5G.
Well, it depends. So you can achieve 75% of coverage with low band spectrum that doesn't really give you the proper 5G speeds, the
Yeah.
way you think about it, right?
Yeah.
So if you use low band, obviously you're going to cover more. So low band is anything below 1 gigahertz. So 600, 700, 700 in here. When you use anything, 3.5, like C-band spectrum really gives you better speeds, and it's kind of the mix. If you run really fast speed, you want millimeter wave, but then that's nobody really. There's a bit of a
I know
disillusion with millimeter wave
I know
at
he's
the
going to be getting in
moment.
touch after this podcast, sounding very unhappy.
Our mate from EE. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Half the time from these, because we've got our main in-house PR contact's a really nice guy called Alex. Shit, what's his surname?
Jackman.
Sorry, Alex. I was blanking on his
I wasn't
surname.
going to mention him, but you have now.
It's fine. It's not like we're going to quote him. One thing PRs hate is actually being quoted. They always want to be behind the scenes. But, you know, we're both E subscribers. You're an E
Yes.
subscriber. So every now and then, it's not that we're talking about, like, a few months ago I went to Venice and I came on and I was bitching about the roaming experience. And so that catches Alex's ear. Not so much when we're talking industry stories, when we're just talking as consumers. So yeah, that
I think roaming is another one that actually we're going to look into it, because again, when you have a bad roaming experience, who are you going to blame? Not the
Yeah.
host network. You're going to blame
Yeah.
your parent company. So having good roaming experience is really critical and key.
Well, so that's just. I mean, quickly finish that Venice one. It was really interesting when I was there because I know a bit more about telecoms than the average person, as you'd expect from me doing this. I was sort of obsessing about it because I was getting fuck all, you know.
You should know a lot more about.
I know. Well,
the average
I'm
person.
being modest, in
really.
I'm
How's
constantly.
the beer, by the way?
Yeah,
I like it.
How's that? You're on the 24 carat.
I'm not sure you like it. I think you describe it as a chewy beer.
Do you mind if I have a go?
Go for it.
And this is.
Oh, it's a bit more real ale.
Yeah.
Bit more real ale type of thing. Bit more malty.
Yeah.
But it's all right. Yeah, but it's more classic English, not like the American pale
like
ales
it.
that we drink.
Oh, cool.
It's good. I'll have a go at the lager in a sec.
Good,
Let
good.
you know.
Yeah. Sorry, back to your Venice experience.
Yeah. And so I was able to sort of obsess. It was a rather sad indictment of myself individually in our times that I was there in the most beautiful city in the world and I was obsessing over which fucking network I was roaming onto. But there we go. And, you know, I was trying things like turning off my mobile broadband entirely and all that sort of thing. Cut a long story short, most of the time I was there, I was roaming to the shittest one, which I think was Vodafone Italia, which was like Edge.
What was this?
I was on Edge. I was living on the edge. And then there was a spectrum of them. Like the next best one that I roamed to all four while I was there. The next best one I think was Iliad, which got me on HSPA. And then I think it was Windtray got me on 4G and only Telecom Italia got me on 5G. Anyway, and that came up. But it was just interesting. It was only because I know a thing or two about it that I knew to sort of be curious about it. And that was back to your point about roaming experience. There's a classic example. To a sort of regular punter who doesn't do this for a living, they would just been baffled by the whole thing. Because especially the variation. I could go from Edge 1 minute to 5G the next minute. They wouldn't understand why.
And when I was traveling to countries like Kazakhstan and so on, I would just buy the airlaw. Because otherwise the amount of money you have to pay for roaming, it's just like I can't expense hundreds of thousands of pounds for
No, not
roaming.
like that MP did. Did you hear about it? He got sacked as Scottish MP.
Oh, really?
He went on holiday and he was using his like MP's roaming and his kids were all fucking on YouTube the whole time. And it was like thousands
Tethering.
of pounds.
Yeah.
Well, this was recently, or
Yeah, some minor scandals. He had to resign over it.
I thought that those Bill Shock those stories are sort of a bit like out of date now, though, because even there's a cap, isn't there, on what you spend each day with EE and with most of
Well,
them.
so maybe that's why he got in trouble. Maybe he sort of did it very sort of with full knowledge of what he was doing.
I was going to ask it's interesting because you know the sort of EE promotional story that we're really great and it's 75% and they're drawing on root metrics, which is drive testing, but it seems like root metrics is obviously just looking at things from a UK perspective, and if you measure up fairly well against three companies that aren't that great either, then your ranking, which I think is really interesting, where we're like 15th or whatever behind all these other countries. That's really what you should be assessing yourself against, is how do you look against not even the US and China, which have a reputation for being a bit further ahead on 5G, but places like Bulgaria and Greece and the Czech Republic that are doing much better. It sounds like the UK is in a really pretty bad position on 5G to me. And
It's actually quite fascinating because you have obviously the Nordics being ahead.
That doesn't surprise
That
you.
doesn't
Sort of
surprise
expect
you.
that,
yeah.
But Bulgaria did very well. So they had a lot of C-band spectrum, and they, I think, using Huawei and ZTE to route the network. So and from
high
that point
quality.
of view, well.
One of them.
but I think when you think about it, also the way we measure it, you're not going to see the way Opensignal measures. You're not going to see the massive speeds because the methodology is taking away the measurements. What have you? It's just more about what do you see as a customer, right?
Yeah.
And quite often when I travel, I have this obsession, which is because of the job that I do. I will go and do a speed test. Well, actually, Opensignal has their own app as well.
You're like a mobile network mystery shopper.
I know, yes, and I found it like, let's say, and I think in Dublin, the networks were brilliant. The 5G was super fast, and I think I was in some place like randomly in the middle of nowhere, and I had amazing coverage. I'm like, how is that possible? That you have a really good coverage in the middle of Poland? There's nothing around there, like and living in the one of the most developed and most renowned cities in Europe. It's not great. But I think that's just a matter of like we probably need more, and that's going to be boring small cells and just to densify the network. And that's
It's boring, but it's relevant.
So
it's very relevant.
I've noticed it being in Slovakia. I've noticed it being so when we used to go there first met my wife in 2005-6, I think. So And at first, you couldn't get any connectivity at all, which is maybe not surprising. And I've really noticed the difference there in the last few years in terms of being able to, if I want to work in her parents' place and they don't have broadband, but her brother does, but I can just tether it to the 5G network. And I went for a hike in the mountains and I was up on one of these viewing stations in the middle of nowhere where there's some bears around but nothing else. And I can still get a 5G signal. I was thinking, how can I get a 5G signal here? Whereas in, as I say, in London, you go indoors and you can't get anything at all.
But maybe the signal
sometimes.
you got was part of it was what Sylvia was describing, which was it was actually a low band sort of coverage.
It was pretty low band and one man using it as well.
Yeah,
exactly. So very empty network. So that's what we see.
And a connected bear.
Connected bear. Oh my goodness! Do you remember the connected bears?
I remember the connected cows.
I remember that. Yes, that was back in the day.
IoT cows.
IoT connected cows.
Yeah.
Recently, I was again. I think I wrote a blog talking about 5G standalone and where we are and the promise and so on. And one of my favorite. Oh my God! I don't mean to pick up on the I have to probably send a letter of apology.
Sorry, Alex.
This podcast.
Alex is a bit like Scott. Don't ever.
But
put
I
her on
think
the
he
fucking
probably
podium.
does like match up very well against the other telcos. But it's just that they don't match up well against European telcos, maybe.
But I remember this advert when the guy was sitting on top of the mountain and the use case for 5G was shaving.
Yeah.
We took the piss out of that
we love
loads.
it.
And then, so obviously, Colorado, like PR marketing, it's based out of US, and they didn't understand what I was talking about. Like, here, watch this video, how 5G was being promoted.
Brilliant.
I mean, come on, like, is this
I really
what
don't
we can
envy.
do?
I really don't
I
envy
could've
people
done
who
that.
work in marketing for these comms people because
No.
they're always trying to find a ways of turning connectivity, which is A, abstract, B, intangible, and C, quite a boring sort of utility.
Yeah.
And trying to turn it into something a bit more sexy, and that's why they get people shaving with a robot on the top of a mountain. It's like,
Would you trust a robot to?
do you know what I mean?
Would you want
Fuck away from me! Get that thing away from me!
when you got to the top of your mountain climb, Scott? Would the
Yeah.
first thing on your mind
What are
be,
you
I
trying
need
to
a
say?
shave?
I don't think I liked your tone there.
Oh, Jesus.
He's trying to imply that I don't climb many mountains.
I'd want a drone flying me a beer in, not a shave.
But then,
No, it's the last thing I want is some disembodied scalpel hovering towards me. Well, all I want is a good, honest beer.
yeah, like if the drone brings beer. Remember those use cases, like what was it during the COVID? Amazon dropping off parcels using drones and so on. That's useful.
That's a brilliant
helpful.
use case, actually. Is you've just done a
AGVs.
mountain hike in
Yes.
Slovakia to
Yes.
the top of Skoroshina, and a drone comes over the platform that you're on and drops a nice, like, cold can of Zlati Bajant into your hands.
And
What
it's
the background
22
ad was
pounds.
known.
It's easy for you to say.
Yes,
Plus VAT.
Zloty Bajan is pretty good one. Is nice.
What's
Is
the
it
best
Slovak or Czech
Which one?
beer? Is it Slovak or
Slovak.
Czech? Slovak beer.
Zlati Bajant.
Yeah,
That's Slovak, that one.
Slovak. Yeah.
Golden
Which-
Pheasant, I think it means.
Golden pheasant. Yes, yeah.
We like our favourite Czech beer. Well, my favourite Czech beer is Stara Pramen.
Staropramen is good. I even drink Staropramen for
Ah,
a person
okay.
that doesn't drink.
What's the best
beer.
Polish beer?
Ooh, I don't know.
Is Poland good at beer?
Poland is pretty good at beer.
Żywiec,
Żywiec,
it's pretty nice.
it's pretty good. Like the way we drink it in Poland, and please don't judge me, is we put a bit of raspberry syrup in it. And then we
I'd judge
put
you
beer
more
at
if
the
you were a
bottom.
bloke.
Yeah, that's how women
Shandy.
drink. No, it's
No,
not
what's
the,
the name?
Oh, women just put a little bit of syrup in. The blokes
yeah, a
don't.
bit of Whoa, what?
Grenadine.
There's another one called
Grenadine kinda,
Tishki.
yeah.
Tishki, is it?
Tiske, yeah. So
Oh,
you
yeah,
have
rubbish
Lech,
pronunciation,
Okocim, Tiske, Żywiec. There's a lot of smaller breweries that come in. And I think, I don't know if you remember this, back in the day, we used to send a lot of apples to Russia, and obviously we couldn't send. So we became very good at doing the
Cider.
the apple
Oh,
cider.
I see.
Yeah.
I didn't know Poland was big on apples. There you go.
Yeah,
You learn something new every day.
Every
We
day.
got a press release through just today, I think, about Three's launching some new ad campaign, just talking about the difficulty of trying to find a way of making connectivity sexy. And I'm trying to find it in my inbox. We didn't write it up.
Do they talk about booze?
Let me see it. I'll
But
dig
then
it up.
it's quite interesting. I think the new generation, the youngsters right now, they're not really very much into booze and alcohol. So that's I don't know
No.
how you're gonna be able to.
No, you should meet my
relate.
son.
Well,
My
yeah.
son's a chip off the old block.
No, it's a depressing future we have with health conscious people who don't drink anymore.
I was listening to a podcast that just says that they're all just more anxious, full stop.
Youngsters,
Yeah.
right?
I mean, you've got people like Jonathan Haidt, who's a well-known American social psychologist who blames it on smartphones and social media and that sort of thing.
I'm very
And
anxious. That's why I drink a lot.
So it's cheaper than going to do counselling, right?
I don't know, but I mean, all these generational things, and then they talk about Gen Z and millennials, and we're Gen X. What are you? You're younger than us, aren't you?
I don't know. I'm not
Are
sure.
you a millennial? Maybe you're a
In my
millennial.
lifetime, I've had Desert Storm, 9/11, 2008 crash, pandemic.
What are you? Are you a
now this
millennial?
war. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
So it's a lot. But then you think about people growing up in the 60s, there's probably tons of stuff as well. Or-
Yeah, there's a Cuban Missile Crisis.
But-
Yeah.
We're going to die in nuclear war.
But then I think about, like,
same.
Growing up as internet native, so I didn't used to use PCs and stuff like that until I went kind of to uni, because like we still used to write things by hand,
With your hand.
and I'm trying to
Do
get
you ever
away.
try and write with your hand nowadays?
Yeah, I used to have the habit.
goes
I
weird.
love writing, but then
Right.
I have all these notebooks. I'm like, I can't bother with that, so I'm trying to get into the habit of writing.
I don't know how to
So
write
you-
slowly anymore.
I wrote a whole story in
my
longhand.
My
this
hand's got a
week.
mind of its own. It's like Evil Dead. It just fucking goes off doing its own thing.
I wrote a story in longhand this week.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because your computer
Because
got
my
knackered.
computer got knackered.
And you're so dedicated that you wrote it.
And I thought, well, I might as well try and put some stuff down.
How did that feel?
Well, it's quite weird. You write differently when you write in longhand. I don't mean that you, but
The actual
you
words
actually
you
use
probably
different.
use shorter words.
Well, I think you think about your sentences more.
That's true. Yeah.
Because you're
Just
trying to
of
be
the old-
economic, you can't really just cross over and
it's
stuff
just
like that. You
better,
have to think
actually.
about it. Yes,
Your
that's
brain,
good.
because I
Yeah.
think your brain moves too fast when you're
Yeah.
on a keyboard.
Do you have a
especially when you
typewriter?
type.
I remember
know, I think
my
it's a
dad used to have a
typewriter.
typewriter. Yes, he used to have a typewriter. That was quite cool.
So I had a horrible Apple experience, which we
Yeah.
were going to mention, weren't we?
Well, actually, we're going to
did.
get onto Apple in a sec. There's one last thing I want to, seeing as we went off on a meandering tangent there, I'm going to bring back with one last thing I wanted to ask Sylvia about her day job before we talk about a couple of stories that we've covered this week, which is, like, you mentioned that you flagged up that piece that was published by Jeannie York from VMO2, talking about vanity metrics and that sort of thing.
Yes.
And she basically says that she talks about a report from another network benchmarking specialist. That's very brave of you to flag that up.
It's the general trend that we're hoping that the industry moving towards.
I won't name them, but it was another one. And it said that UK's mobile operators are hitting the sweet spot with consumers satisfied with every day. Even more importantly, the report found that speed is not a key driver for people to move networks, with a poor signal and black spots ranking much higher than speed as a reason to change. So what I want to finish off on, and this reminds me of a conversation that happened at this Rakuten thing. It probably was that one we were talking about with that geezer from 3 and Dean and all that sort of thing, where there was some talk of speeds and feeds. There's some talk at the other end of things like cost per bit. But I'm more and more convinced by, I'm not just saying this because you're here, Sylvia, but by the sort of thing that you focus on, which is user experience. Actually, another thing that's made me think about this, I've been writing up a white paper or writing a summary of a white paper where they say that NPS, Net Promoter Score, is
Shit.
In this case, they're saying it's shit as a way of in real time optimizing networks and that sort of thing. And I was sort of thinking, duh, because I've never understood, and I don't know if this overlaps with what you do, whether you come up with against NPS very much. But I've always hear about Net Promoter Score, and you hear like proper people who just do business, as opposed to us where we're writing most of the time. They sort of obsess about it, and it's quite a handy metric to sort of pass further up the corporate food chain. You can go, look, our NPS went up by 10% or whatever. Aren't I doing well? Give me some more money, or at least don't sack me, or whatever the conversation is. But I just don't get how they measure it. It seems so arbitrary. Like Net Promoter Score, are you just constantly sending out surveys to people? Is it qualitative or quantitative? And if it's quantitative, is it done through people like you where you've got real-time monitoring, or is it just people, again, filling in surveys? So anyway, and the long and short of it is, the point I'm getting up to is you've got all these things like NPS, you've got speeds and feeds, but the really important thing is that all-elusive user experience. Is the person happy? Are they happy enough? I suppose the ideal is that they're happy enough to recommend it to their friends, and then the lower bar of that is they're happy enough to not fuck off somewhere else. So yeah,
It costs so much more to bring the consumer back than actually keep them. And I think NPS will, because of the way we measure it, we're not able to get the NPS. But typically, what would you do if you have, let's say, app? You can say, how satisfied are you with your network experience? And you say, very much or not. But quite often, if you do a speed test, you're not happy for the reason. So again, what we do in the US, we run a survey of 55,000 US households. And that survey finds that what was the most important to you when you were trying to find a wireless carrier for your personal cell phone? So number one is cost. So 21%, 19%.
So that's straight up,
straight up
cost
cost.
comparison sites, that sort of thing.
Yes. Number two is reliability. So 19% says reliability, 18% network quality, and 17% coverage. So, the first one, obviously cost matters, and then how reliable and what sort of quality and also coverage you get is super important.
What's the difference between reliability and quality?
So reliability is whether or not you can...
You have a connection at all.
You have connection at all.
Right.
And quality is like whether or not you can do basic applications. So that's
Right,
quality
whether you get the swirly thing.
Yeah, well, whether, there's like when we talk about consistent quality, we talk about whether or not you have download speed of 5 megabits per second, upload of 1.5, time to first byte, sufficiency and latency and so on. So trying to understand, how good your connection is. Can you do the basic day-to-day tasks? And that's what's important, because most of the time, are you going to be really watching HD video streaming all the time? No, you want to just use your
Certainly not on your phone.
To browse and so on. So I think that's what's important. And I think I've been long enough in the industry to see, kind of really doesn't matter how fast your network is if you cannot use it. Yeah. People will be unhappy and they'll
you got that
sort
of Maslow's hierarchy. You got to be able to get a connection first,
exactly,
before you start wondering about how fast.
And when it matters, because for instance, imagine so I have actually. Going back to IT, I have a connected watch, but the very simple reason is that I'm very forgetful. Sometimes I forget my phone. But then if something happens, how I'm going to call? So
your watch has got its own little...
Is it an iWatch?
SIM?
Yes, it's an iWatch.
But it's got its own SIM and modem and all that.
eSIM, yeah.
Oh, standalone.
eSIM and,
you sometimes forget your phone. I can't imagine ever forgetting my phone.
Yeah, I do.
I'd probably more likely to forget my wallet or my keys than my phone.
Well, like if you forget your phone, you forget everything, because your
Is that why you put it around your neck?
Yes, because I also dropped it enough. So last time I dropped my phone, it cost me a lot of money.
She's got her phone and she's got a sort of
lanyard.
Lanyard,
yeah. That's very trendy, so I'm trying to be
is it?
trendy, yeah.
Okay, well,
yeah.
Noted.
Yeah.
I want to see you carrying your phone on your neck next week in Copenhagen.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. Okay, well, look, do we, before I move it on, in terms of like your day job and stuff that you want people to know about you and Opensignal, have we sort of covered most stuff, or any other things?
We covered a lot. I think I just want to bring the whole moving away from vanity metrics to really talking about reliability and quality, because I think that's what's important, and kind of what we do, the work that we do, understanding not only mobile networks but also fixed networks. So how good experience on fixed wireless access is, what is it worse, better, and so on, because that's some of the questions we're getting. We're looking at the M&As just to understand, and a lot of work, again, Robert Wyrzykowski does a lot of work looking at spectrum. So kind of what's the relationship between spectrum
It's
and
an
5G?
army of Eastern Europeans.
No, it's the same. It's the same,
It's the same
Polish
person.
guy that we spoke about before.
Yes.
Well, actually, on a recent pod, we didn't talk about it for very long, because it's, as you've probably noticed, that my time management isn't very good on this pod, and the first segment goes on for ages, and then suddenly I've got to cram everything else into a short amount of time. But I wanted to flag up a thing that
was
came
a good
up.
beer, by the way.
That's decent beer, was it? All right, well,
Good.
You're on your own. Oh, actually, I'm gonna have one of those lagers. Let's see here.
I'm glad you like it, yeah.
Yeah.
And I basically asked. Oh yeah, that was it. There was a conference, WRC, at the end of last year, and they were fighting over some 6 gigahertz spectrum.
That's
And a bunch of it ended up getting given to mobile instead of Wi-Fi. And
apart from US. In the
apart
US,
from US,
yeah.
oh, that was different there,
US,
was it?
yeah,
it's
US
quite
they have
controversial,
already,
I think.
yeah.
Okay, well, I
The
missed
US
that
have been assigned to
nuance.
Wi-Fi
Already
already.
been some
Yeah.
coverage that Mike Dana might have done. I like reading on it.
Okay. Anyway, but my reason for bringing it up was I was basically going, do we even fucking need it? Now, you might argue, in fact,
I'm ex-GSMA as well, let's not forget.
but my point about do we need it is like, is all this mid-band spectrum actually being used? This comes back to the stuff we were talking about with William Webb and the S-curve of, PS finally having a beer. You should have said, mate, if you were thirsty.
No, I didn't feel like it until he showed it to me.
Until he waved one in your face. Of if we're getting to a stage where we're reaching a sort of a peak of in a typical market, the amount of traffic on the network, and yet the argument is that we're always going to need more and more of this mid-band spectrum, mainly as a capacity thing. I'm just wondering whether we've got to a point where we don't need any more spectrum. What do you reckon?
Well, spectrum is a finite resource, and that's
Yeah.
kind of GSMA line, and there is So when you think about spectrum, you have obviously licensed spectrum, and that's what operators have to pay for spectrum and so on. There's been a move towards unlicensed spectrum. So and like Sigfox, remember this?
Yeah.
Good old Sigfox that I haven't heard
Ian's an
about.
expert
I
on
think
Sigfox.
I think is
I finished them.
Ian had a source, and he was always writing stuff that upset
right.
them.
Yeah. So but then that was the unlicensed kind of spectrum, and you have and then you have the private networks that are using spectrum. So you hear about the private networks, kind of CBRS and so on in the US. What we see right now, we're seeing a lot of 2G and 3G, mostly 3G networks being switched off, and then refarming that spectrum for 4G and 5G. So I think more spectrum you have, there's always arguments, the better, and that's what operators would argue. And they would try to make sure that regulators don't charge them too much for that said spectrum.
But
Right?
I think
So
the problem that they have is, like, there's a lot of spectrum being used for old services, and the whole 3G
military
switch-off thing.
Yeah.
And the problem with like countries like the UK go, you can't turn off your 3G network because there's this 90-year-old woman who lives in the Outer Hebrides that's still using 3G.
And she might
decide at some point that she's had a fall.
There might be a story in the Hebrides Gazette.
There'll be a story in the
That'll
Hebrides
go to the
Gazette
National.
that the Daily Mail will pick up.
Yeah.
BT switched off 3G service. and
BT
left
hates
patient
old people.
dead at the bottom of a stairwell. And that's the reason they
Bloody
struggle to
journalists,
shut off some of these.
Even worse, you have a lot of 2G in M2M.
Yeah.
And then God knows where they are, and maybe they perform some very vital tasks out there.
Yeah.
So quite often switching off any of the legacy networks because we really need 3G? I mean, I have a bit of a problem with 3G as a network. I don't think that was the best network that possibly could be. I mean, 2G fine, 4G fine, but I think kind of every other one is.
Well, it's the even ones, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Goodness, I might get fired at the end of this.
3G was just a sort of shitty attempt at mobile broadband.
4G kind of give us the streaming, the Ubers, and then what have you. That's good.
Yeah, 5G's gone down that odd shit route. again.
There's still hope.
You two keep talking. Beer's caught up with me. I'm going to have to sneak past.
Right.
And now when we've got a guest, we can do that without having to pause the whole
Okay,
pod.
cool.
Yeah, I think I do have some sympathy for the telcos that are trying to switch off legacy platforms where
It's not easy.
No,
No.
because it's difficult to do, I think, anyway. It's complex. But if you've got regulators leaning over you saying you still need to support these services because they're critical for some kind of service they provide to somebody, then it just makes it incredibly hard.
And we're looking, again, the reasons why people don't switch off certain 3G networks is quite often...
Twister.
Exactly. Is because A, they don't have 4G phone, and B, like when you think about it, traveling anywhere and you don't have the VoLTE enabled on your phone, then you're in real trouble because you can't use your voice services, what have you. And then voice over new radio, that's another...
This is the 5G.
Yeah, the
voice
5G
service,
over new
right.
radio. I don't think...
Is
many
anybody doing
operators-
this, though, at the moment?
I think somebody is doing voice over new radio. I think EE will...
Which weirdly gets pronounced boner by the Americans.
Really?
Yeah, even
That's
though it's
odd.
VONR, they pronounce it boner.
I think there's lots of trials happening with
Yeah.
voice over new radio.
Mike Dana finds it very amusing that they call it boner when they talk about it as an acronym. It's almost like a Spanish V, you know, that they
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
but
Then when you think about it, like, again, and you have to think about roaming agreements and all of that when you go and travel and switching off, I think 3G is going to go away before 2G because 2G, makes sense. But then when you think about producing new phones, that's the challenge. I think we started to talk about spectrum. Obviously, harmonization of 5G spectrum was a very important thing because you have slightly different bands across the US and Europe and Asia Pacific and what have you. But I don't know if you remember back in the day, I think there was 3G time when you used to go to the US, you couldn't use your phone because
you had to have a dual band phone.
Exactly.
Or two phone.
Yes,
I do remember.
That's really fascinating when you think about it. And
the thing I find interesting is the higher spectrum, the higher up we go, the less useful it seems to be to a certain extent, because even though you're getting super fast services, you're having to build out so much equipment that it's just not economical. So those lower band, those mid bands, and say somewhere
most
between
valuable, yes.
say somewhere between 2 gigahertz and 3.5 gigahertz is really the kind of stuff that you want for. Sorry, Scott's leaning on me now for people who can't actually see us.
Cameras. Carry on, mate.
But that spectrum just seems to be like prime real estate.
it's prime real estate.
And therefore, if they can get 3G off that fairly quickly.
It makes
and
sense.
free it up. It makes sense, and it would solve a lot of the issues that they're complaining about anyway, like this pressure to have 6 gigahertz spectrum, the upper band for the thing.
I
that
think
Scott
some
was
of it is
talking
about future proofing, and some of it is I don't know how closely you follow the WRC is about thinking about 6G,
Not that closely. I shouldn't have
6G
followed
ahead,
that
and
closely.
the 5.5G, 5G
It was
advanced
like
with all
December.
the promises.
No one gave
Yes.
a fuck.
I was eating turkey, and I was in my turkey eating, putting
Yeah.
weight on phase at that stage of the year.
Sorry, what were you saying, Sophie?
But you're thinking about we already started talking about 5G advanced, which is real, which is happening actually in some of the Middle Eastern countries. So you have
Right.
obviously UAE and Saudi heavily investing and thinking about how's it called, sensing networks sensing. We already talked.
Sensing.
Sorry,
Right.
I don't know why I'm doing this. Okay, yeah. But
No, people, no, we are on.
yes,
We're on TV.
yes, yeah. All right.
Yeah.
But when
My wife always talks to her hands, even when there's no one watching.
oh
Some people just do.
yeah, some people do.
Is that an Iranian thing? Is it an Italian thing?
Don't know. I just think it's a my wife thing. Yeah, it could be.
But when you think about going further up, like the millimeter wave, which obviously hasn't been as awarded as it originally was told and promised, like you get really fast speeds, but you don't really see the ecosystem behind it. Number one, number two, in South Korea, which is one of the most advanced 5G markets,
They gave it back, didn't they?
had to give it back because they didn't roll out fast enough. Because it's obviously everything in South Korea being measured. So they have not reached the targets of a number of base stations that they
Yeah.
had to deploy within a certain amount of time. They said, that's it. You have to give it back.
Verizon was the big company that I think got this really wrong with their, because they were
They
really
went big
behind.
on millimeter
They were
wave, didn't
massive on millimeter wave. They're like, oh, it's only really 5G if it's millimeter wave, and look how much millimeter wave spectrum we've got. And then it very quickly became apparent that unless you have a base station on every 50 meters, then people aren't
They
going to
use
get
it for
service.
stadiums.
Yeah,
They use it
exactly.
for
Stadiums
stadiums
is-
and so on.
I
Stadiums,
get that.
airports, malls, high
Yeah.
footfall.
Factories.
No, it's brilliant for
There's
that.
a Deutsche
Yeah.
Telecom announcement today about them doing millimeter wave trials for some
private
industrial
networks.
stuff. Yeah.
So for private networks, and again, ex-IoT analysis, it makes absolute sense because
Yeah.
you want to have really fast speed and very low latency because
Yeah.
obviously if you think about automating factories and think that's is the logistics or like ports are super excited about 5G and 5G standalone in particular
Yeah.
because that's when you get the latency, massive IoT and so on in there. So I think we can talk about spectrum, and for sure I could talk for forever, but I don't think most people
I'm
are
gonna-
super interested.
Well, it's not
Oh,
that.
no,
It's not that. It's just a matter of time.
I think people are quite interested
Well,
in
we'll
spectrum
we'll
stuff,
have,
but
maybe we'll put a pin in that and talk about it when you come back.
Yeah.
Sure.
And you obviously have an open invitation.
Awesome. I can bring some Polish beer /
That's true. Actually, talking about that, do you want another drink?
Yeah,
Was that a yes?
Yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Do you want G&T, or you brought a little sparkling white wine?
I don't think I should have sparkling after G&T. Let's just go with another G&T.
Even if you haven't finished that one, at least
it's not,
this one's cold.
it's
Well,
not
it's
very
cold,
strong
yeah.
G&T, is it? So
No.
No, I think she's going to be all right.
it's more like one
I think
part
I'm
gin
representing
to 10 parts. Top water.
neighborhood well.
All right, well, let's move it on that stage, just in the interest of time. So we got a couple of things we can talk about, Ian. One is basically you.
Oh,
You've done a couple of stories that are sort of cloudy.
Oh,
Well, let's just do you next, and then we'll talk about Apple's AI phone after, as that's a slightly sort of less in the weeds one to finish off on.
right.
So you and I both wrote, like at the start of this week, my headline was Telefonica Germany renews Ericsson core deal despite recent Nokia AWS infidelity. I decided to go with the sort of cheating on them motif. And that was because about a month ago, it was announced that Telefonica Germany was checking out a core in the cloud using Nokia and AWS.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden they've come running back to Ericsson full of remorse, going. It was just a physical thing. I never loved them. And then you
Well,
typically.
yeah,
Yeah, I know.
really
Yeah, that's my superficial, facetious take. I'm obviously going to hand it over to you.
I like your little metaphor. But
There we are.
it's
You got
not
fucking
quite.
brighten up the day every now and then, haven't you?
No, I'm all for it. I like doing that kind of shit as well. But
And then your take on it was I think you perhaps did more than one, but your most recent take was Ericsson battles Nokia and AWS in Telefonica's War of Two Clouds. So what I thought was interesting about it, obviously my infidelity motif was just to say, well, hold on a sec, are you going with this lot for the cloud or that lot for the cloud? And I think that's that's one aspect of what you're reconciling in your piece. So I'll shut up now.
Yeah, I mean, I did my first piece on it a couple of weeks ago when they first came out with this news that they'd done a deal with Nokia and AWS.
Right.
And there was a lot of coverage about it at the time because it was like presented as the first example of telco workloads in the public cloud in Europe kind of deal.
Yeah.
You know, sort of pitched in a similar way to the way the AT&T arrangement with Microsoft has been in the US. And
Oh yeah, and that's the other story of yours.
I think a lot of the coverage was just like writing it up from that angle, really. And I think Reuters got the scoop on it, and a kind of sort of preview of it. But it sort of begged the question: what were they doing before? To me, you know, what was their original core network? So you know, I looked into that a bit, and it was obvious that they'd been using Ericsson. You know, they'd had this arrangement with Ericsson since about 2020 for 5G core. 5G kind of converged core, you know, like road path to being able to do standalone, and it's cloud native, and you can support 4G on it and all
Roadmap, I
this
think you'll
stuff.
find. Don't think road path's a thing.
Whatever. Towpath then.
All right, mate. If you're going to persist with the path,
Ridgeway,
or just path.
a Ridgeway,
Don't qualify
a
the
road-
path.
Yeah. So they've had this arrangement with Ericsson since about 2020, and they are their core network provider. That is basically what Telefonica Germany's traffic's on at the moment.
Ericsson.
On Ericsson, because it had to be on something. It's not like AWS and Nokia have just come along and done something that
Out of
wasn't
the blue.
happening before.
Yeah. So they're the legacy provider.
They're the legacy provider, and the thing about the core network is that telcos don't tend to have two mainstream cores in the country. You know, you BT in the UK is on they used to be on a Huawei core very controversially, which EE had.
That's not allowed.
When BT bought
That's
EE,
very naughty.
they very quickly realised they'd have to get rid of that Huawei core, and it seemed to take them ages to do it. Yeah, and they moved over to this.
Can I quickly butt in? Sorry, I've got a complete tangent. I think Strandy might have flagged this up, and I went and looked into it independently. There's Huawei. Huawei's actually got
this
an
is
e-commerce.
a massive tangent. I hope it's good.
Huawei's got an e-commerce site, and they what's it called? It's called Huawei Mossel Store. And I thought it was a bigger story. I thought, shit, has Huawei just suddenly gone mad and decided to get into e-commerce? Turns out what happened was a few years ago, they were owed a bunch of money from Telecom Argentina.
Right.
And Telecom Argentina didn't have any cash. So they went, how about we pay you in beef and Malbec? Honestly.
Brilliant.
They fucking did. And so they created this store to basically flog off all this beef and wine
That's a really entertaining story. Who's got that story?
Well, it was first broken by The Guardian years ago, and then I was reading it more recently on Huawei Central.
Hilarious.
Can I just say, everybody wins?
That's a brilliant story, actually.
But I mean, but the headline on Huawei Central written recently is Huawei responds to rumor of being, quote, the largest beef importer in China.
That's pretty funny.
Anyway, complete tangent. Sorry for butting in.
Yeah, so Huawei used to be, for instance, the main core provider to BT. They've now moved to an Ericsson core. It's just about done, but it took them a long time. You know, but you basically have one main core network, and it might be a distributed core, so it's a number of data centers across the country. That's increasingly happening instead of just putting it in one, because you need lower latency and all this stuff. But to have two cores,
two
for your main
cores.
thing, unless you're just using one of the cores for, say, IoT or something.
What was the metaphor you said before we started recording about? You had some point about a second one being completely redundant.
I know only of one company that had separate core. So I think China Mobile had a separate core for IoT. So
so you might have a separate core for like a specialist type of service, like an IoT, or
but
for
not
private
for your regular
stuff.
vanilla connectivity.
But you would not. So they've kind of come along and started doing this thing with Nokia and AWS and pitching it as like the first example of doing sort of core network workloads in the public cloud. And then, as you rightly said at the start of this week, I mean, I'd sort of written this piece that was fairly speculative a couple of weeks ago, like what's going on here, because Ericsson's the main core provider. Now, maybe they're doing different applications. Sometimes people talk about core includes a lot of functions, actually, you know, and you do have arrangements where different people are doing the different functions. But, you know, so IMS tends to get lumped into the core things like that.
I find the whole concept at the core so hard to sort of
I mean,
conceptualize.
it's all the control center functions. It's all the sort of software based, like home location register and packet core is the classic.
Right.
it's your brains of your network, really. You're the software brains of your network. But it's become apparent since this, like the Ericsson announcement this week, where they've very much sort of said we're still here, we're still doing applications, and we're still providing the infrastructure for Telefonica Germany. That what's happened. Then I had some back and forth with Telefonica Germany as well with it to try and get to the bottom of it. That what's actually going on is they've got parallel cores in operation. So they've got about 46 million customers in Germany, and they've got most of them, the vast majority of them, are on this legacy core that
About
they've had
45.
from legacy core. By the way, it's not a very old core; it's an up-to-date, modern 5G, core. From
But Ericsson says that they've got
that
45
is
of
on
them.
Ericsson's infrastructure platform. By the way, CNIS or NFVI, they've got the two, but it's virtualized. It's on their kind of cloud platform, run on Telefonica Germany facilities. It's a private cloud platform essentially they're providing, and they've got this Nokia and AWS core that's supporting or due to support, it's unclear what's going on exactly in that sense, about 1 million customers.
Yeah.
And the uncertainty is what's the plan for the future? Because if you've got these two cores, you've got a kind of duplication of costs and resources in a sense. You're having to support two platforms. You're doing some of it in the public cloud, you're doing some of it private. It's not the most efficient way of doing things. And my speculation, which they're definitely not going to confirm, is that they're sort of running the two against each other to establish.
Yeah, so my speculation was they're dipping their toe in the water of the cloud core.
They're dipping their
thing.
toe in the water of doing
Public cloud
things in a slightly different way with some public. By the way, I don't think it's strictly a public cloud deal anyway.
Why is that?
Because it's not all running on AWS facilities.
Right, on just
So
the
it's a
nebulous
very,
public
very,
cloud.
very classic thing that happens these days is people pitch things to be public cloud and they're not really public cloud. It's a
Hybrid.
public cloud provider doing the technology stack. So the AT&T deal is a classic example of this with Microsoft, which is not really a public, and actually AT&T would admit that it's not a public cloud deal. They say it's a hybrid cloud deal. That's what they call it. AWS is very insistent that it's a.
Could it be for like enterprise use cases when you think about it? When you say
no, it's a mainstream core.
Mainstream.
It's for the million customers they're talking about are not enterprise customers. They're consumers.
I'll quickly say another quick shout out to a light reading piece written by Mike Dano, which is relevant to what you were just saying. Inside AT&T's Nokia rip and replace with Ericsson. That looks like I haven't actually had a chance to read through it, but the headline promises some, and it's a nice long piece. So he's obviously had a good deep dive there.
It's a good deep dive. There's not a scoop as such, but it's a really good piece on what's.
He's just got in there.
All the details.
He's got his hands
it's got all
dirty.
the sort of
Cool.
naming of the stuff. But so you've got this. You've got a plan to have 1 million on AWS Nokia, and then the bulk of the customers still on the old Ericsson core, which is not that old. I think what they're doing is
the deal was only in 2020 or something.
Yeah, they're kind of running the two off again. They've almost become this test case for looking at doing things a full stack way, not on the public cloud through Ericsson.
Like the legacy monolithic way.
It's not. I wouldn't call it legacy monolithic.
Okay.
Ericsson's technology is it's a 5G core that's cloud native.
Fine.
I'd resist I'd resist any sort of.
Well, stand corrected, mate. You don't need to fucking labour
against Nokia applications. So Nokia doing the packet core functions, IMS, all that other stuff on an AWS infrastructure platform, basically. But that infrastructure platform is running partly in an AWS facility and partly in Telefonica facilities. So that's where I would push back on it being described as a public cloud deal, because some of it isn't public cloud. Some of it's actually not in shared, strict definition of public cloud being.
And then we could get really in the weeds of what is the difference. I mean, we know technically what the difference is, but what is the practical difference between using AWS's tools but on your own servers versus going all in their tools, their servers, everything's outsourced to them. I don't know if you. I don't understand what
the public cloud. If you're using an AWS facility, it's infrastructure that you might use.
Yeah, no, I understand it conceptually. I'm
companies
just wondering what the practical implications of it are.
the practical implications would be economics. If you've got a server that's used by numerous companies and you're sharing energy costs at that for data facility because
it's cheaper.
The whole point of the public cloud and the reason the hyperscaler works is because you've got these massive data center facilities that are used by numerous customers.
So if it's cheaper,
and you're sharing energy costs.
If it's cheaper, what's the main argument against going there then? Just the
privacy, security.
Privacy, security.
Well, but what I'm saying is that's not what's happening.
Yeah,
So,
and I'm going off on a slight tangent. I'm saying, I wonder why they haven't gone all in. Like, I wonder why they've only got halfway. Why haven't they just gone all in and just chucked the whole core at AWS and said, fucking deal with it?
well, it's all at AWS, but it's not all at AWS data facilities. It's AWS's technology stack, but some of it's
that's what I meant. Why isn't it all in their facilities as well?
Well, because you've probably got one AWS data center in Germany. In fact, I think they've just set up one this year, which they talked about. You're talking about a telecom network. So they'll be talking about things like latency.
So it can't be over in the States because of the speed of light.
Latency. She's been talking about things like quality of service. You've got regulators being concerned about it.
Regulators is fascinating when you think about data centers and the traffic not being able to leave your country, right? So a few countries have this.
That was a big thing a few years ago. What they call it? Safe harbour or something?
I mean, the distributed core, with people like BT wanting to put its core around numerous locations now in the UK because you're closer to the end user and therefore edge computing.
Yeah.
I remember the first time I heard that was Marcus Weldon at Nokia just talking about the speed of light, and I'd never thought of it in that way.
But that's something you can't do with the public cloud.
Yeah. Okay. So what's going on with this then?
Well, as I say, I think what the interesting thing is how this plays out, because if you talk to Telefonica Germany, if you talk to their press people, they push back on the notion that it's not the public cloud for one thing, but they're also quite sort of wary of saying where it's going to go. If you say is your objective to phase out Ericsson ultimately and just be with Nokia and AWS in the future, because they're basically providing parallel services, and you've already moved 1 million off the Ericsson core to be on this, or you're going to be on this Nokia AWS core. I mean, this is not in the short term. This doesn't look like a good thing for Ericsson, because they were supporting. They did have all that business to themselves.
Which is why they
Spain, Telekom Spain. What sort of do you know?
Telephone Germany. This is
about Spain. What do they
own?
Because it'd be interesting to see what the group level, what sort of.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, Telephone Spain probably isn't any public cloud because they would have talked it up.
I think they have their own. Okay, fine. That's.
But
it was clear to me from the Ericsson press release that I wrote up, and the quote from a chap called Daniel Linebacker, who's head of the customer unit Western Europe at Ericsson, and he's sort of what usual sort of stuff. Yeah, we're really excited to do this, that, and the other. And then his final sentence was, "We're proud of our joint achievements and that we are reconfirmed as O2 Telefonica's partner for the core network for years to come."
Well,
I thought that was a point. The whole point of the press release is them to go, "Everyone, calm down about Nokia."
But do you know the most interesting words in that quote are years to come?
Yes, indeed.
So this isn't going to be a very. So this is the interesting thing, is that when that announcement came out about Nokia and AWS, it's like all these public cloud cheerleaders that you get in the industry going, "Oh, at last, Telefonica Germany has realised the wisdom of doing the public cloud, and it's much more sensible to do things that way."
Danielle, extremely
it
excited.
isn't the public cloud, strictly speaking, because it's. Some of it's on Telefonica facilities, so it's a public cloud provider providing the technology, but it's not all public cloud really. And two, Ericsson isn't going anywhere for a long time, and might not. We don't know, because they won't say, Telefonica Germany, what their ultimate plans are, but they might decide that this whole Nokia AWS thing. Maybe it's not what they want.
Well, so they're actually a really interesting case study. They're like dipping their toes in the water, aren't they?
The operator to watch in Europe.
Totally.
If they were to release results, by the way, if they were to be really upfront and open about this, and this is what we found out, that with the public cloud you get these benefits, but you get these disadvantages. With the Ericsson full stack, you get these benefits, but you get these disadvantages. I think it'd be really instructive.
Well, there's a scoop potential. We need to go sucking up to some Telefonica Germany people. So
that's
we get the inside.
I'm always sucking up to Telefonica Germany people. Pretty much spend my whole life sucking up to Telefonica Germany.
What's the best technique? So you just say, "What's your favourite sausage?" You have to hang around their stand
at the Mobile World Congress and be nice to them.
Cool. Sorry, were you just looking something up there? I noticed you tapping away.
Yeah, I was looking at Telefonica. So Telefonica is actually providing Movistar Spain. They're providing public infrastructure as a serving platform as a service. So they have the public cloud networks they're providing to their own companies, but I couldn't figure out.
Oh, that's probably them selling
They're
on stuff.
them
though,
selling, but
rather
couldn't
than
figure
what
out,
they're doing
what
in
they're
telco workloads.
Okay,
but,
I'm gonna move it on because there's another telecoms cloudy thing that you wrote up. You just
There
published
is.
yesterday, Ian. The headline is Microsoft to quit affirmed and Metaswitch in telecom retreat.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, so I mean the unifying
By the
theme
way,
of
I'm just
these
going to butt
two.
in. I want to give a shout out to the other Milo Brewery, Rebellion Lager. It's very nice. It's like a full tasting lager, but it's still quite refreshing, easy to drink. It's only 4.5%, so I recommend it. Go for it.
This
Sorry.
is a good advert for beers. This pod, it really is.
We have to go and tell them.
Well, I think
give us some money
Please
for
do.
advertising.
Yeah.
Obviously, Sylvia's other half feels strongly enough about it to get her to lug in all this
Yeah.
beer. The least we could do is to give it a shout out.
Yep.
Anyway, sorry.
Yeah,
back to your story.
I think the unifying theme of these two pieces is obviously the public cloud being involved in telecom, and I'm always more cautious about how, because I think there's this perception that it's coming and it's an inevitability, and actually it's made no progress whatsoever, frankly, in telecom, and this is
right.
This is a real sign of that. I think there'll be obviously a lot of hype next week in Copenhagen because that's a big show for the public clouds. But
it certainly has become it.
They're really nowhere, to be honest with you. Actually,
and nowhere in what sense? So, if you could make it a bit more specific. I mean, we've just got through talking about how Telefonica Germany's dipping its toe in the water with the public cloud, so it's getting somewhere.
But that's exactly what you're talking about. You're talking about one European operator dipping its toe in the water.
Whereas, as a broader thing,
and then you look at what's the other big AWS deal, because this was very much heralded as their second big deal. The other one's Dish, which is about to go bankrupt.
Is it literally about to go bankrupt?
Well, I mean, most analysts think it's going to go bankrupt.
Shit.
So
that's not ideal. And Rakuten, I mean,
that's
I don't
not
know.
Public cloud.
I don't know, but I'm just thinking about greenfield operators.
Oh, so that's not public cloud though.
Yeah. All right, sorry, I won't go off on that tangent then.
But so Microsoft, so Google really doesn't have a big presence as far as I can see in telecom in terms of doing. I mean, they do data lakes for Vodafone, and they do obviously.
But they
IT
wanted to, didn't
stuff.
they, when they made those acquisitions?
By the way, what I'm talking about is nothing to do with their role in things like IT for telecom operators, where they obviously have a massive role.
Yep.
It's to do with the telco workloads.
Okay.
But Google, I'm not really aware of being very involved at all or having a very big presence.
Don't come up
at all.
very much.
And
they're definitely the third of the big three.
They're the third of the big three. Microsoft's big deal is AT&T in the US. So Microsoft's strategy is a bit different from AWS's in that it got into this in a very big way in 2020 by buying two companies that actually develop network software. One's Affirmed, which does 5G core stuff. So what we were just talking about with Telefonica Germany, the actual applications themselves, the network functions. And then, I don't know the order, but it also the same year bought a company called Metaswitch, which is UK based. My boss used to work there for a while.
Yeah, Phil.
And they're more. They also do some 5G core stuff, but they're very much more in the sort of PBX, voice communications space.
Okay.
Now,
and why did they buy them at the time? What was their stated rationale?
Well, I think if you talk to people like Rick Liavani, who we've met at the Copenhagen show, his take actually really chimes with what's gone on this week, which was that they didn't really buy them to be network functions developers. They bought them to learn about what was going on in telecom and to figure out how to host network functions on your public cloud. Basically, it gave them something to play with, to work out how to actually do that on Azure for operators.
Right, a bit like when Google bought Motorola. They weren't really that bothered. They just wanted to fuck around with it for a bit.
Yeah, but at the same time, Metaswitch and Affirmed had a big customer base, and they're supporting customers, and they've carried on supporting customers. And they've also been able to position themselves to some extent as this kind of full stack, like some operators don't want to go and get the network function and the infrastructure platform from separate companies.
They want end-to-end.
So they want end-to-end. So classic example, this is 3 in the UK, which uses a Nokia core, but last year at one of our shows, Network X, made a big deal about putting that up for tender. And they're considering their options, and they talked Microsoft up a lot. Why did they talk Microsoft up? Because they've bought Affirmed, and they've got their complete full stack, and therefore it's a horrible expression, but we only have one throat to choke. We don't have to worry about integrating
American
anything.
corporate terms.
Integration is a massive
integration,
issue,
exactly.
yes.
So the sale of
what's under the kimono? That's another of those American.
So the reason for my story was actually came through Phil. Because he used to work at Metaswitch, he's sort of in
So he's
touch
a bit
with various
attuned to it
people
all. Right.
involved with Metaswitch. And I got wind of this call that was being done by a guy called Andrew Ward, who now has his own consulting firm called Award Consulting. It's good if your name's Andrew Ward.
See what he's done there.
Something like that.
Yeah.
And he used
Better
to
than
work
Andrew
at,
Consulting, isn't it?
he's obviously like a really smart guy, but he used to work at Metaswitch. I think he joined them immediately after he left university and worked there for a really long time. Eventually left to set up Award Consulting, which very much does sort of Metaswitch support for ILEX and CLEX. So like local exchange carriers in the US.
Got to that bit of your story.
Yeah. Like small operators, rural operators in the US, basically, is the way to think about them. People who use Metaswitch products and need kind of support on using Metaswitch products. And the reason for the call was, what does this Microsoft decision mean? The Microsoft decision, by the way, which wasn't broken by me or Light Reading, but another publication, was that they're making quite a big headcount cuts at
Business
Azure
Insider
operators.
Yeah, I remember when that Business Insider thing came out. I didn't
Yeah.
cover it for two reasons. One, Business Insider is a bit sketchy at times. Two, they're quite paywalled. And
Well,
three, I saw
think
loads of
they
other
were
people
spot on
covering it.
about that.
Yeah, well,
Otherwise,
that was my
pushback,
mistake. I'm just explaining why I didn't.
But there was this announcement of cuts at Azure for Operators, which is their telco-facing bit, and then since then it's been a little bit unclear exactly what in Azure for Operators they're getting rid of.
That's
and
right.
what's going on. I got on this call with Andrew Ward, and he's been privy to, because of who he is, communications between Microsoft and customers, which he was quite happy to share on that call.
Right. So Microsoft wasn't involved in this call. It was just him.
It's just him. And
Just
basically,
sharing.
what
was in it for him to share all this insight?
because his business is supporting customers, and that's who's on the call, isn't it? ILEX and CLEX, a lot of them.
Oh, so it wasn't necessarily a call designed for journalists.
It wasn't designed for journalists at all, but he knew I was
You
on
just
it
snuck
because I snuck in and said I'm a journalist on it.
And he was like, "All right, and
yeah, it wasn't
fucking
it
behave
wasn't
yourself."
a press call.
Okay, right.
But the communications that have gone backwards and forwards between Microsoft and its customers about what's going on are essentially, we're getting out of network functions and we just want to focus on doing the Azure for Operators infrastructure platform.
The regular public cloud sort of stuff.
Yeah, they don't want to do, well, it might not be the public cloud, it might still be a private cloud.
Or hybrid or whatever. Yeah, okay.
But they don't want to do the applications, basically.
Okay. They don't want to do the stuff that was the whole
stuff
reason
that
they bought
Ericsson
those
and Nokia
things.
does, and that Affirm and Metaswitch were doing.
Do we know why they only made those acquisitions a few years ago.
2020. Yeah.
Do we know why they've done a 180 on
Well, so Andrew Ward's assessment is that it basically hasn't gone anywhere, and that they overestimated the. I think some of the rationale for buy. He questioned the rationale. I think for getting into By the way, he doesn't have a lot of insight into what's going on with the firm because that's not his deal.
Okay.
But his thing about Metaswitch is that there was a lot of talk when they made the Metaswitch acquisition about 5G core and everything being virtualized in the future, and you can run it on the public cloud. And he made the point that actually most Metaswitch customers are fixed line customers serving business markets. A lot of this rhetoric that was coming out of Microsoft wasn't really relevant for them, and so maybe they just kind of got it wrong. But then he also made the point that this whole big public cloud transition that I think Microsoft was anticipating in 2020 just hasn't happened. And what they've done is they've looked at the growth rate of telco moving workloads into the public cloud, and they've compared it with things like what's happening with their Teams for Enterprises business or what's happening with AI, and they've gone, it's not really going anywhere. Let's kind of have a kind of reappraisal and rethink what we're doing. By the way, Metaswitch itself, they don't break out revenues from Azure for Operators, which would include Metaswitch and Affirmed. But I went to Company's House, which is like the SEC, I guess.
You actually went there?
I went there digitally. I didn't go there. I went to Company's House digitally. I took a digital journey to Company's House, and I got the Metaswitch accounts. And last year, their revenues are down 15%. Their profits are down 15%.
Really?
The real shocker, R&D down 40%. And their reason for R&D being down 40% in their annual report was that Microsoft has taken resource and put it into other bits of the business.
Oh, so brain drain.
Which sounds, well, yeah, exactly. You're taking people out of Metaswitch and basically sucking them into other bits of the... But the big losers in all this are people using Metaswitch. So the call was a lot of the call was like Andrew Ward giving his view on what's going on, but then he spent 30 minutes fielding questions from people
like,
about
what the fuck?
Some of them went way above my head, by the way. It's like if we bought an IP3510 or whatever, what do we do about this,
Oh,
this bit of
that's
software?
straight in my wheelhouse, mate.
You know, and his take on it was basically that what's going to happen is they will eventually be phased out completely, and they will either be your best bet is to probably think about in the long term moving to a rival service, because they're just not going to exist anymore.
Yeah.
Because they're going to wind down support for them. But the thing that he was curious about was the possibility of them trying to sell those assets. And he was saying if they were going to sell them, it would have probably made more sense to do it before you had a big round of layoffs than after you have a big round of layoffs.
Well, they'll certainly get less for it now, wouldn't they?
So he was a bit confused about, he was a bit perplexed about what's
do you know
going
the
on.
interesting thing about it?
But
I mean, there's part of me that would be critical, especially so soon after they made this bold bet. But then...
One thing before you say that, I did get it kind of confirmed from a source, but Microsoft wouldn't comment, or they haven't got back to me.
Right, so it's just a source.
But it's a source that's in the know.
Right. Okay. Fine. Yeah. No, I never doubted it. No, I think it's a really good story, and it's a really good scoop. Obviously, slightly in the weeds scoop for our sector, but it's definitely a scoop. And I just Googled it while you were talking. No one else has covered it. No one's even churnalised you, which I think is a bit offensive. Someone could at least
I don't
rip
care
you
about
off.
that because it got a lot of traffic.
I bet it did. I mean, that's proper journalism. The stuff I can only imagine doing myself. What I was going to say, yeah, you know how we're always hearing, like we're about to go to digital transformation world next week, and we're always hearing about how telecoms got to be more like Silicon Valley, and they've got to be more fast failing and all that sort of thing. Well, this seems like an example of fast failing. They rolled the dice, they made a bet, they spent a few million quid, they gave it 4 years, and they went, fuck it, it's not happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really good, and obviously Microsoft, not even Silicon Valley, they're so old. God knows where they grew up. Was it in San Francisco? It was Seattle, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, West Coast, whatever.
Same thing. Yeah.
Silicon Valley, basically we use Silicon Valley to mean sort of American tech, don't we?
Actually, a lot of it now is in Texas and all that stuff, isn't it?
Austin's turning into a really big place.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's interesting. Obviously, how it plays out, like your angle about what it's going to mean for sort of Metaswitch customers, is one thing. But then again,
the other thing is, what does it mean for AT&T?
Right.
As I understand it, AT&T is using some of the technologies that they would have acquired with Affirmed for its 5G core. Now, if Microsoft wants to get out the network function stuff and just focus on the actual infrastructure platforms, then what are the implications for AT&T? I expect Mike Dana to do a full investigation.
I'm sure he will. Okay, talking about
before he goes on leave.
Silicon Valley companies. Yeah, and talking about leave. The one with
something interesting you said.
Go ahead, sorry.
Failing fast, right? So when you think about World of Telecoms, not necessarily we don't do the whole failing fast, but Alphabet's been disposing of things that are not working very, very fast, and lots of companies been acquired. Like Cisco is well known for,
and they've got the whole moonshot division.
Exactly, all of that. But like, I don't think we see we see innovation in telco. We see R&D, but.
No, well, that's the sort of enduring cliche. Whenever people are talking about digital transformation, they're going that telcos have got to be more like Silicon Valley company.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand, and it's not so trendy now, but people used to talk about DevOps and shit like that.
Yeah,
and agility and all these sorts of words.
Yeah.
And I understand the concept of it is to be light on your feet and to be able to power things up and power them back down really quickly. And obviously, telcos, for a lot of reasons, aren't very good at that. Part of it is legacy culture, but part of it is also the fact that they've just got these enormous physical networks.
Yeah. What is going on here?
Ian's doing this. Well, because you're just on you're just on 1.5 little gin and tonics. We're on about 4 beers.
All right.
I do it in a
subtle way, but then well, it's blame Sylvia. I was going to let it go. She had to call you out.
Sorry.
And I think the point I'm trying to get to is I don't know, and I actually genuinely don't know, this isn't just rhetorical, how easy it is for telcos to be that agile because they've got all this physical infrastructure. I mean, I know there's legacy, but then, we were just alluding to it earlier, and I made perhaps a not particularly useful correlation at the time, but Ian was talking about Dish, and I mentioned Rakuten, and the dotted line in my mind was greenfield operators. And one of the things that's supposed to be cool about these greenfield operators is they start off just being cloud native and all these buzzwords that we hear about. Everything's virtualized, and so in principle you can chop and change, and you haven't got to worry about all this legacy shit that you got to deal with. But it doesn't seem to be happening even with them.
Not very fast. When you think about it, so you have Rakuten, you have Dish, you have kind of one-on-one that's been taking forever to take off. And generally, obviously Ian's not here, so we can't talk about Open Run because he's the massive proponent.
He's the one. So you have been listening to the pod.
Yeah, of course I can't talk about Open Run without Ian being here. But
no, it's probably a good time to talk about it, because then we've got half a chance of keeping it short.
Another point to make, digital transformation. So there's been, at the beginning of COVID, we actually did lots of studies trying to doing survey back in the GSMA days, trying to understand what enterprises are doing, and all of them saying they need to do digital transformation, so become more digital, transforming how they operate and what have you. But there's this massive gap between IT and OT, and then trying to integrate those two. It's always a big challenge, and it's not easy because people it's like speaking two different languages, and people don't talk to each other.
And this story that we were just talking about of Ian's to do with Affirmed and Metaswitch almost seems to sort of confirm that.
Exactly, because you can't really easily, when you think about transforming anything, like if you have something already built out, it's kind of not very easy to rip and replace. It takes a lot of time and effort. I was just alluding to Open Run and said we can't talk about Open Run when you're away. So yeah.
And I said on the contrary, we should talk about it because then we got half a chance of keeping it short and sweet.
But I think you made a point earlier on today about operators becoming a utility, and I think that's always the challenge. And everybody's saying we cannot go that way, we cannot do that. But the cost per byte, and I think, I don't know whether it was you, but I heard on one of the podcasts saying that actually cost per byte has massively decreased, and there's all sorts of wonderful ways of making the networks more efficient. So again, energy prices went up. That was, I think, year before. So everybody become a bit more conscious when it comes to cost. And there's lots of really interesting measures that you can employ to put yourselves to sleep. You can think about understanding where networks dynamic, and you use AI for that. So you can actually, there's a way to become a bit more intelligent and automate the networks, what have you. But the question is, how long is it going to take? Is it really going to offset some of the cost that you have to have in here?
And if
networks, energy for networks is a massive cost.
And if you can't increase ARPU, are you just always going to be looking to salami slice overhead, like OPEX? And there's got to come a time where...
If your AI is based on the data centers spending a vast amount of money on NVIDIA GPUs, then... you're kind of cutting energy use here, but bumping it up tenfold at the.
I don't think anyone.
Facility.
I think that's really, really fascinating because all the data centers obviously massive energy.
I mean, AI won't decrease energy use. Actually, that is one old trope that we should really look to sort of kick people in the arse about.
Is that something people are saying, that AI will decrease energy? That we a green thing?
Well, René Haas, who's the CEO of Arm, said, and these aren't disputed, The Economist did a big piece on it, that he thinks AI data centers will account for about 20% of US energy consumption in 2030, up from 2% today.
Wow,
Fuck.
That's
that's quite good.
So you're basically, the operator's going, we're going to cut energy use by using AI.
But
basically what they're doing is offloading it to somebody else.
Well,
and it's going up a lot there.
It's a bit like...
it's like Norway is what it's like.
Well, and talking about green stuff, and like the Spectator's done a few pieces recently on electric cars.
Yeah.
And they're obviously always positioned. They're obviously always positioned as really green.
Will we overrun?
No, but he's just saying get a fucking move on.
Yeah.
And like, I think it was it Honda's first electric vehicle was called a Leaf. That's how green they're trying to make it all. Yeah. But then I've always thought, just to wrap this up, and then I will move it on. It's just sort of offsetting it. So yes, they're less overtly polluting than internal combustion engine cars. They don't have exhaust pipes and all that sort of thing. But the electricity's still got to be generated somewhere. And then you've got places like Germany, for example, that went all in on Russian gas, and then because of geopolitics, that all went Pete Tong, and they're having to fire up some more coal power stations.
The most ridiculous one's Norway.
Right, that's what you were just about to say.
All electric cars, all hydrocarbons, but they sell all their oil to other parts of the world, and that's how they funded the hydrocarbon revolution or whatever,
all right.
the hydro stuff.
So talking about AI, quick segue. Last story we're going to talk about. We'll keep it short and sweet, Pierre. Don't worry. Well, you did tell me we had 4:30, yeah? So I got 20 minutes.
No, it's just like we're coming up on 2 hours.
Yeah. We're coming up 2 hours, are we? Already? Okay.
This is going to be the longest one ever.
Oh, blame me.
Here's your fault.
Sylvia,
With all those,
shut
beers, those Polish beers and whittling on about Poland all the time.
So I wrote a story this week called Apple Finally Joins the AI Gold Rush. Ian, you wrote a story, a sort of news analysis as is more your style, called Apple Drops the AI Ball and Leaves No Clear Upside for Telcos.
Yeah, it wasn't a popular story with some people.
It wasn't, yeah. Well, you can tell us about that. I always like it when people flame our stuff. I used to have comments on the stories on Telecoms.com, Sylvia, and I used to really enjoy it when people laid into me, because then you can just go, fuck off, and just have a bit of fun. Whereas we haven't got comments right now, so I don't get any of that.
Oh, dear.
Anyway, so the top line is Apple did a big announcement that was all about AI and about how AI is basically going to be sort of endemic to all their platforms, i.e. iOS and macOS. And I can see, Sylvia, you've got a Mac out there. You've got an iPhone on with the lanyards.
Yeah.
Pierre's,
Apple Watch.
Yeah, Apple Watch. Yeah, you really are. You're even more. Pierre, have you got an Apple Watch? So you're one more Apple than even Pierre.
So one thing about AI that I wanted to mention, which is a reference to a
I
competitor.
thought you might want to mention Apple and their shitty batteries.
No, but there was a good headline from Steve Saunders,
Oh, right.
our former
The former owner of Light Reading.
where he'd gone, "Ay caramba," and then there was something after that.
Right,
I
but
just
whatever.
thought the AI caramba
You
was.
can see where Ray gets some of his headline ideas.
I just
from.
thought that was really good. I liked it a lot.
That's the sort of thing I wouldn't be surprised to see Ray write a headline like that. as well.
Credit to Steve for that. I thought it was pretty good actually.
I used to work with Ray, actually. Yeah. Back in the day. Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's actually always been something I associate with Light Reading is cheeky headlines or pun worthy or whatever.
Yeah.
Old school, in other words. Yeah. So they basically said that that sort of AI is going to be integrated in everything they do, macOS, like your MacBook you got there, or iPhones or iPads. But then when you sort of dig under it a little bit, there's some degree of local AI, because no one ever thinks of Apple. You know, the big like large language models, the big Gen AI platforms we think of as OpenAI, which is ChatGPT.
Yeah.
And then we got various flavors of Google ones. And then we got a few others. Anthropic is that one.
Gemini.
There's
the other big
Llama.
one.
Yeah, Gemini's Google, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's Llama, which is a Facebooky thing, Meta thing.
Out in China.
But
Yeah, it's not open source, by the way.
No.
I know they say it's open source, but that's bullshit.
Yeah, well, just like OpenAI is not open at all, which is what Elon Musk
I don't think they make it out
constantly
to
gets
be
butthurt
open, though,
about.
do they?
But no one's really been speaking about Apple in the AI context, and I think Apple was shitting itself a little bit. It's like getting left behind, and so this announcement.
So
Evidently
go ahead.
so.
they have been putting stuff quietly into software and stuff. Like, for example, as a guy who
Well, they were early pioneers with Siri,
Yeah.
but that wasn't
but
really AI as we know
no,
it now.
Like, okay, I'll give you one use case that blew my mind is the voice isolation feature that came out.
And the AirPods.
AirPods. No, on the editing software. It came out in like June 2022. So this is a good 6 months before.
What does that do? What's the significance
So it
of that?
knows what's voice and what's noise, and then it keeps the voice intact.
Oh, I
and
see. So
reduces
it's a
the noise.
filtering, digital filtering.
Yeah, back in the day, you had to like pick the frequency and lower that, and it would
You had to do
damage
it
the
more
voice.
manually. Right,
Yeah.
right.
So they've been adding all this stuff, and
But just quietly.
But like one thing about Apple, and obviously I have everything Apple because it's easy.
Yeah.
Because it just works.
Well, you bought in and all
it
your stuff's on iOS and
press the button
and
and whatever.
iTunes and shit.
But back to I have the new AirPods because the other one's stopped working, and like,
And when
this
you speak it-
automatic-
Did you tell him to
Yeah.
get them fixed and get told that it cost you about $2 billion to fix them?
Well, we'll
Well,
get
last time I was trying to fix
it's not
something that
even
you had to
your
go to
own
Poland.
laptop, and you're complaining. It's not even your money.
Let's see we finish, and then we'll have your anecdote
But
about your.
it's you can set you can there's a setting saying like adaptive hearing. So when you obviously listen to podcasts, when I listen to you every single week, obviously
As you do.
as I
You're
obviously do.
counting the minutes.
And then
on a Monday morning.
it's and somebody else is talking to you, it would just reduce what you're listening to. It's just fascinating.
If you
It's just
start speaking,
amazing.
it reduces. It pauses the music or whatever.
Yeah.
But it
Reduces
doesn't
the
if you
volume.
sneeze or if you
Yeah.
I see.
clear your voice. It knows that you're talking.
Oh, I see. So it's basically trying to say, I see, you've just met someone, so
Yeah.
you're going to want to hear less of this shit, so you can hear
and
them.
more
Yeah.
somebody else. Yeah.
Yeah, well,
So that's
good.
adaptive. That's pretty impressive.
That's good.
right?
If it's done well.
On
Yeah.
Apple TV, the thing that's going to come out later this year, they're going to have voice isolation, but for movies. So no more like those really loud noises, and I can hear the dialogue.
Or like the ads. Have you noticed the ads are always twice as loud as the fucking content?
Yeah. So that's going to fix that anyway.
So Ian, what's been your experience with Apple this week?
So I had my computer just stopped working.
He spilled beer all over it. And
Your
he said,
MacBook.
My MacBook.
Yeah. That you bought what? It's a work MacBook. So you got it off work like 2 years ago, was it?
Full disclosure, it's a work MacBook. About 2 years, I think now.
It was a touch bar one of the worst laptops they ever made.
Right.
To be fair.
Okay.
Good riddance. No, for real.
Well, I'm glad you say that now.
Because
I'm glad you admit that they designed something that was shit.
Oh yeah, the touch bar.
I tried to
is one of the worst
switch it
laptops
on.
the
ever.
touch bar. Oh no, that was bad.
I tried to switch it on Sunday.
I don't understand what this touch bar is.
Oh, it's the thing around here that
Oh,
you
the thing
control.
up
Yeah,
there.
that was so pointless, useless.
I see.
And it just didn't come on.
Didn't turn up.
And I thought, well, the battery's run out. I'll plug it in overnight. Woke up in the morning, still didn't
wouldn't
come
happen.
on. And I did that thing where you're supposed to hold down the button for 15 seconds.
Hard reset and all
a hard
that.
reset.
Reboot.
Still didn't work. Took it into the IT help desk. Very good IT help desk actually we have here at Informa.
Credit where it's due.
But because it's an Apple, their hands are somewhat tied. They said, we don't really carry parts and there's a limited amount we can do because they're so closed. They're definitely not open RAN and all that stuff, and the equivalent of that in the sort of components world. So you need to go to the Regent Street store,
Genius Bar,
the Covent Garden store. So booked the guys
it's
are
really fucking humble.
It's quite
place,
easy
a
to book
Genius
an
Bar.
appointment, and you get seen, and the guys know what they're doing. But I was I was told by Informa that you find out what it costs and just put it on your corporate credit card. It doesn't matter. Don't worry about it. So I thought fine. Took it in, the guy took it away, investigated it, came back, went, it looks like there's some liquid on inside the machine.
Oh, you
Maybe
didn't tell me
someone
about that.
in your home.
Did you
something
you
just
spill
don't
some
know.
beer on it or something?
There's never been anything spilt on it. I mean,
Okay.
I would admit if I'd spilt something on it.
It just came in magically.
Yeah.
The other thing that could have happened, which Phil thought is probably the case, is that the battery's leaked.
Oh.
So there's damage to the battery.
Yeah, but then you would have like blobbed up like.
Well, so the images that you get shown, which look like an X-ray, are like a blobbing up. It's not like there's like a big spillage.
Yours
area.
was swelling
It's not
up.
like it was dripping.
You can see the bit where they're referring to. It looks like there's liquid on it, and it's literally a couple of drops. That looks like it's come out of something. It's not what you get if you spilt a pint of beer over it or anything. I mean, I have not spilt anything on that laptop.
So, cut long story short, what would it cost to?
The repair costs, which I was expecting them to say it's a dead battery or something, and this needs replacing, £200 or £300, £1,279.
It's probably
This,
because it
by
was
the
the
way,
battery and the motherboard. Which
This,
is
by the way,
everything.
is the second experience I've had of taking a piece of shit Apple equipment
You can tell Pierre's getting defensive.
to the
about it.
Covent Garden store, because I had a similar thing happen with an iPhone
You
a
baked
few
it.
years ago. No, this wasn't.
That
a
wasn't the
baked
one he put in the
iPhone.
oven.
That was the
That wasn't the
successor.
turkey stuffing iPhone.
Taking an iPhone that stopped working to the Covent Garden store, and also being told there's a problem with the baseband processor.
Oh.
We can send it back to the factory and get it repaired, but to be quite honest with you, you're looking at a write-off, because to do that it's going to cost a full. And this is what makes me not like Apple anymore these days, because they used to be this company that if anything went wrong, they'd be quite quick to just go, we charge a large amount of money, but we do that because if something does go wrong, we'll sort it out and don't worry about it. Whereas now they seem to have moved under Tim Cook, who I've not got a lot of time for, with his cheap Chinese components and all that stuff. They seem to have moved more towards this model of, if it goes wrong, it's up to you basically just to buy another one.
Yeah, that's
no
what
one's ever going to pay £1,300
So I don't know about
Yeah.
cheap Chinese components, but one thing I do get the impression
That's
of
what
under
he specialises
Tim Cook-
in, is cheap Chinese
Well, he
components.
specialises in supply chain, which may or may not include cheap Chinese components.
Yeah.
But it's
Which is quite
designed in
alliterative.
California. It's still designed.
It's designed in
Yeah,
California.
that's-
They always
that's
write that, don't
yeah,
they? Is that written on your one?
I don't know.
I noticed you got a calendar there. That's quite handy.
Yeah.
Is what bothers me more about Apple is I know they're very profitable. I was an analyst back in the day, and I was a smartphone analyst. And one of the things we used to at a company called Strategy Analytics, and we used to look at margins and profitability. And on phones, like Apple had something like 50% margin, and everyone else had single figures percent. And and it's fine. And I'm not going to slag off Apple. If someone like you, Sylvia, where you've got the full Monty of Apple stuff and you're happy with it and you're happy to pay for it because you think the resulting experience is worth the money, then that's not for me to second guess that. But it does slightly annoy me when they're making such margins that they'll still be so tight-arsed.
Yeah.
You'd think they could just go, do you know what? We're so sorry, sir, that after 2 years, your MacBook's fucked. Here, have another one.
Well, I noticed a change because I had a problem with a charging issue a really long time ago where I was plugging it and it wasn't charging.
Right,
and it was
like
actually
a lightning.
Yeah, but
charger,
it was a stupid issue. It's one of those things where there was actually something in the
fluff in the port.
Yeah. But I couldn't
get
get it.
USB-C
But I
as
couldn't
well.
get the fluff out, so she had to sort of. But she did say as soon as I turned up and booked this Genius Bar appointment, she said, "If this doesn't work, we'll get you a new phone."
Yeah, exactly.
And the
I just
message
think- I
I'm
just don't
getting
get why
now
Apple doesn't
is
do that.
you pay £1,300. It's like,
Exactly.
are you kidding me?
I mean, my brother, for example, has been an Apple fanatic since the 80s. But even he will say, even he will get the arsehole when he thinks their profiteering is excessive.
Massively, but it is. But you locked into the ecosystem.
Yeah, yeah.
Which
Well,
is that very much walled
And also, I
gardens,
think
right?
profiteering comes with problems, and they're obviously not in. I mean, I know they've had this little hoop-de-doo day where they're all of a sudden into AI, and their share price went up a few percentage points, but they've not been in a good position leading up to that. iPhone sales are slowing down. There's no innovation. They don't do anything new anymore. They've come up with no new products for years.
Well, so probably they're going to
He
launch a
forgets
ring.
about the vision, but it's
No one's ever going to buy that Vision ski goggles thing.
Oh no! But like
Yeah.
one thing I want to say about company that whatever. I dropped my iPhone and what they want to charge me here, that was ridiculous. I want to do it in Poland. But like when I have an Aura ring,
Yeah.
which is really good for like measuring sleep and what have you, and
Who
they
makes that?
keep on Aura, Oura. I think it's
And that's for like sort of monitoring certain health stuff.
sleep, like walking, how
What do you
well
do
you
with it?
rested and so on. So I can see my sleep, how good I rested, I'm rested, my
then-
readiness.
but what do you
score,
do
I
with
give
the
a readiness.
information?
Well, I know that if I went to bed late, I shouldn't really,
So it's more sort of feedback about your
feedback,
lifestyle.
Yes. Yeah,
and that sort of
lifestyle.
thing.
When you
Right.
get stressed, can understand when you stress with hours. But this one stopped working. The battery stopped working. They sent me a new one.
Yeah.
So that kind of you appreciate it's not a cheap product. It's not as expensive as Apple, but you kind of feel
Yeah.
they're actually
Well, that's my-
trying to.
That's my.
I think it's the liquid problem that was your thing. If the battery just dies,
But there hasn't
randomly-
been liquid spilt on it, so
Yeah.
if there's liquid inside it, then it's come from the battery or it's come
Yeah,
from.
but they wouldn't know
components inside
what's lithium leak with versus other liquids.
Bear in mind,
surely.
when he went into,
Okay, I've not spilt anything on that device. I'm
But
the only
then
person
when he
who's
went
ever
to the
said it,
shop,
so-
he just had 2 pints of me. So he walks in, smelling like Hazy Jane, and they go, "Sir, there seems to be liquid in your iPad and your MacBook." And he goes, "I don't know how that got there." And they're like, "Of course you don't, sir."
But surely when they open it, they would be like, "There's a liquid." Oh, and then the battery, there's a hole in it. That's where the liquid came from. They would have seen that. I don't know.
Anyway,
They would have seen that and not tried to charge £1,300 and get someone to buy a new computer, Pierre. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, if it's like
Because they're that honest.
if the
Apple.
liquids-
they're so honest that they would obviously just go, "You must, you." That's exactly what they'd say. They wouldn't try to get you to pay a massive amount of money
I've had
as a
three-
business trying to make a profit.
I've had 3 experiences where my screen failed, my graphics card failed after.
Now, obviously, I'm wrong, and this
And
massive
they- and they
corporation
replaced
is
everything.
right.
well, let
But-
me finish.
But yeah, but I take care of my stuff. You bake your iPhone.
I didn't. Okay.
So that is
I know-
that is what you were trying to infer.
I know as an Apple shareholder,
Ian,
you
he's just
love
trying to
Apple,
wind you up.
but
No.
they're frankly, let's be honest, they're not where they were under Steve Jobs. I hate to say it, but the guy who runs the company now is not an innovator. And this whole AI
There's no
update
Johnny
this
Ive.
week,
Yeah, but
this whole AI update this week is proof of that. And everybody can get very excited about them coming out with this Apple Intelligence thing. Oh, look what we've done. We've
And I'm
updated
gonna-
Siri.
I'm going to give Pierre and Sylvia one last shout, and then I'm going to conclude on that because we're way past 2 hours. And believe it or not, I need another slash. So, Pierre, what's your last pushback to Apple being shitter than it used to be?
No, I mean, I think it's easy to say, oh, they're shit now. That's the word. Steve Jobs died. You know what I mean? It's like,
And that's when
we
companies,
don't know-
unfortunately, that's when companies
we don't
lose their
know
way.
what an 80-year-old Jimi Hendrix trying to play looks like because he died when he was 27. So, like, you know what I mean? Like maybe the company would be just as boring with Steve Jobs. Maybe he only had a certain amount of ideas. I don't know.
Right. So
I think you're right. The innovation kind of is not there necessarily. The just kind of is reiteration. So every single new iPhone, like the improvement is incremental.
Well, they've gone
It's
down the road
incremental.
that Steve Jobs would have been horrified by. That
Yeah,
you just come
it's
out
like,
with new numbers and labels.
Right now your iPhone is just really a really good camera.
It still has
what-
everyone
yeah,
else though.
Yeah. Well,
yeah,
okay.
look, that's the sympathy I've had, and I'm of the 4 people in this room, I'm the least invested in Apple. All I have is iPads, but what Pierre just said, I concur with. Perhaps from being an analyst before, it's really hard to innovate on smartphones at all. That form factor matured incredibly quickly.
What about those?
But the thing,
Flippy ones.
I've
Yeah.
heard rumors that Apple will do that. I don't think they need to do foldable
before you
phones.
sign off,
Yeah.
No, I'm not talking about the Apple. I'm talking like I think the next thing that probably Apple going to do is a ring, Apple ring or something like that, because they kind of
Like the
investing
one
in
you
that.
got on.
Kind of similar, so they're going to absolutely kill
God,
Aura
you're really
because
techie, isn't it? I don't know anyone else who's got.
I know
a
I'm an
smart ring.
anxiety analyst, so I have to be.
Right.
but the thing before you do sign off, the
Yeah.
one thing you should note about this whole, because we've just talked about my shitty experience really, rather than
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Apple Intelligence thing. The big thing about the Apple Intelligence thing, from my perspective, and I know that you might push back on this a bit, and Pierre certainly will, is that they've basically done a Faustian pact with OpenAI.
No, that was actually what I
yeah.
was going to sign off on. So let me.
Because they can't do it themselves.
Yeah.
basically.
So let me sign off on that note, and I'll give a nod to Ian's blog on the matter, where, just to stress it again, I think I said it earlier, Apple drops an AI ball and leaves no clear upside for telcos. We haven't got time to talk into the no clear upside for telcos angle. But basically what you've got is you've got a little bit of local AI, but as soon as some heavy lifting's required, they hand it off initially just to ChatGPT. And I think that's an interesting point.
But it's done locally though, for security.
Well, no. So I mean, not the ChatGPT stuff.
Well, yeah,
That's
you
done.
can have,
That's done in the cloud.
You could all have the app in, yeah. But I mean, the whole
Yeah,
point of like
and they've got a
upgrading
lot of
the new
emphasis.
iPhone is that it's done on the phone. That's why you need the latest one to do it.
You need the latest one to do it on the phone, and you need the latest one to have this umbilical link to the ChatGPT cloud. And they put a lot of emphasis on privacy, partly because Microsoft just launched this Copilot Plus PC that included things like this stuff where you can, I can't remember what it's called, begins with R, where you can just look back on the history of stuff you've been doing, and people got really freaked out from a privacy point of view. Like, is it constantly mapping everything I do? Not that I ever do anything on my laptop that I'd be ashamed of at all. And anyway, so there was an emphasis on privacy and how even when you're using ChatGPT, it's on Apple servers using Apple chips and all that sort of thing. But I concur with Ian's point. It still felt like a bit of a anticlimax, the announcement. It's like, ta-da, Apple does AI, and it turns out most of the heavy lifting's done by a third party. So I think I'll leave it there because we've done loads of time. I need another slash. I know, it's amazing. I'm pleased I went for that one. Can you imagine the fucking trouble I'd be in?
You'd have been tying
God damn.
it in knots and getting
Sylvia, it's great to have you on. I can't believe you haven't had you on before, and you're welcome to come back anytime.
Well, we'll do.
Yeah, cheers.
for
Thank
sure.
you very much. And yeah, next one you hear from us will hopefully be recorded from Copenhagen. So thanks a lot for listening, and make sure you join us for that one.